Datuk Khalil, apa khabar, my friend?
Dia orang semua kena unmute
Oh, dia on mute. Oh, I
mute
see, I
mute
see. Ya,
mute.
dia muted ya. So kita ada Datuk Khalil tu, uh, penerima anugerah akademik
Assalamualaikum.
negara. Oh, waalaikumsalam. Dengar
Waalaikumsalam.
suara pun.
Prof,
Oh,
tadi your system of apa tu mute untuk saya. Tapi
ya,
alhamdulillah
ya.
saya boleh kan. Thank you,
Ni
thank you. Alah, kita nak belajar teaching ni.
saja-saja nak maklumkan kepada Dr. Fazli, ni penerima anugerah akademik negara bahagian penerbitan ni, kategori
Oh,
penerbitan.
jangan
Ah,
jangan jangan banyak-banyak sangat promotion, bro.
kena promote lah kawan kita kan.
Thank you, thank you.
Apa khabar Datuk Khalil? Okey eh?
Apa baik. Okay, Prof semua sihat lah.
Okey, alhamdulillah.
Bila nak balik school ni? Ha?
Sampai habis lah nampaknya.
Okay, teruskan. Ya, speaker kita pun dah ready dah.
Kita 5 minit lagi. So,
Ya.
I don't know whether dah sampai kat YouTube ke belum. Check kejap. I don't know whether Oh, okey. Dah on kat YouTube dah. So, program kita hari ni pun sampai
Pukul 1.
1 ya. Apalah.
kita try break. Ada breakout session actually. There will be breakout session.
Tapi untuk yang Webex sajalah ya. Yang
So Webex.
YouTube tu,
Tapi kalau yang YouTube dia orang nak join kan buat sendiri-sendiri lah, maksudnya on their own.
ah,
Uh,
yalah, dia orang can create apa ni, Google Meet pun boleh.
betul.
Kan siapa yang ada Zoom, kalau dia orang ada if they want to take the initiative to
To
create,
discuss kan, participate.
kan, actually Google Classroom, Google Classroom pula. Google Meet yang paling mudah kot sebab dia free kan. Tapi
Betul.
Zoom yang free punya I'm not sure boleh buat breakout ke? I rasa untuk
Tak
yang
boleh.
tak boleh kan. Untuk yang subscribe. Untuk yang
Untuk yang subscribe je. Betul.
Tapi Webex ni I rasa most university mungkin ada kot. Not
Tak
sure.
juga, tak
juga.
semua juga, tak juga.
Unimap ada kan?
But we on Google Meet juga sebenarnya.
Oh.
And then it's a bit limited juga sebab G Suite pun tak semua subscribe kan. Kalau G Suite tu boleh buat breakout.
Kami actually USM memang dah lama dah sebelum web, apa ni orang kata apa? Sebelum apa ni COVID kami dah pakai Webex lama dah. Tapi zaman tu tak ada orang tak ada.
Ni baru dapat optimize resource ni.
Saya in fact sebelum Webex lagi, masa tu remember Adobe Connect. Masa zaman tu saya dah pakai dah.
Pro memang lagi awal dari masa Pro.
kita kena merintis lah kan supaya kita dapat bawa benda ni kepada our people kan.
Exactly.
I see myself as the explorer lah.
Yeah. So I also told myself that sometimes we need to kita kat depan supaya orang lain boleh start slow kat belakang. Kalau kita slow, orang lain tak gerak.
Exactly. Someone has to do the apa ni, kalau macam masuk hutan tebal tu, yang duduk kat depan dengan parang tu, dia yang kena rintis, dia kena yang merintis jalan tu.
Exactly.
Reminds me my childhood lah, masuk hutan dengan bapak. My father lah buat kerja tu, merintis masuk hutan yang tebal lah. The virgin jungle, can you imagine virgin jungle, tak ada laluan nak masuk pun, tebal sangat.
So now you are exploring the digital virgin jungle.
Yeah, the digital virgin jungle, so to speak. Okay, we have another 1 minute. So Dr. Tazri dah prepare ya? Dah okay semua on your side? Okay. I will start exactly at 9. CDE punya program ni memang kita start right on time.
Oh, 2 tu lebih Prof. Ramai ni.
Oh, I tak check. Dalam Webex.
Dalam Webex at the moment.
Oh, okay. Alhamdulillah. Sebab ini tajuk yang memang sangat-sangat penting lah sebenarnya. Dekat YouTube, I don't know how many. Tak check lagi. I wish actually kalau boleh biar ramai lagi because yang ini tajuk ni penting sebab this part of the assessment kan. Of course they can listen to the recording tapi tak sama lah. Okay, kita boleh mula ya. Betul Zazli ya?
Boleh.
Alright. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan selamat sejahtera kepada semua rakan-rakan pensyarah, all my colleagues from USM, especially in Webex. I think mainly from USM here in Webex, and also our fellow educators from all over Malaysia. Mainly they are on YouTube. We have YouTube live, so this program is also streamed live on our CDAE YouTube channel. So to all our participants here from USM, please check out our CDAE YouTube channel. Please subscribe and please click the bell so that you can get the latest notification for any program for any video we upload to our YouTube channel. We have about 2,000 academic staff. So I would assume all of our staff subscribe to our CDAE channel, and of course our students as well. So thank you everyone for being here. This is one of the program in our training series, professional development series, brought to you by Center for Development of Academic Excellence. And my name is Abdul Karim Alias, the director of the center, CDAE. And today we are very fortunate, very lucky, very privileged to have our invited speaker today, Professor Madya, Dr. Muhammad Tazli Azizan, as you can see on the screen. Last week, he also gave a session on humanizing online learning. It was a very fantastic, wonderful session. We learned a lot of things about the aspect of how to make, our online course so-called having more human value, human connection, and human interaction, engagement, emotional engagement, and so on and so forth. If you missed the session, so feel free to check out our channel. The recorded video is there for you to access. And please feel free to share the videos, all the videos on our YouTube channel far and wide, especially to all the educators around the world. Okay. So welcome, Dr. Tazli. Thank you for being here and for doing a second session. I hope you can do more. Yeah.
Inshallah.
From March onwards until November, we have a micro-learning series as well. So before we start, today actually the title of this program this morning, I think is very, very important. Right? Yeah. Maybe a screening. Okay. All right. So the topic this morning is strategies for preparing higher order thinking skill assessment, or in other words, HOTS. So it's going to be hot this morning because we are going to do and learn about HOTS assessment. So to me, it is very important. So I will let Dr. Tazli to share on this one. But before that, let me just share very briefly, although I have introduced him last week, but I believe there are new participants today. So Dr. Tazli's so-called tagline or motto is empowering teamwork skill, enriching creativity, instilling values, and inspire people everywhere. Professor Madya Dr. Muhammad Tazli Azizan is currently an associate professor at University Malaysia Perlis, UNIMAP. Since January 2021, he just joined UNIMAP because previously he was with UTP, okay, University Technology Petronas, for which he has served UTP for the past 17 years. he graduated in PhD, his PhD in chemical engineering. So he's a chemical engineer, okay, from Imperial College under scholarship, Commonwealth scholarship. Graduated in 2014 and then came back fresh from PhD, appointed directly as the Director of Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, or CITAL, at UTP. So at a young age, you can imagine he was given the trust by the top management to lead a very important center and a new center in UTP. So um, our friend here has a very high credibility here. Yeah. So then he was appointed also as one of the member of National Education Policy Reform Task Force during Dr. Mazli as a minister, and also after that seconded to as CEO of Perak ICT and Multimedia GLC, or Digital Perak, as CEO for 9 months, and then he left for some reasons. Okay, and now he joined UTP, and I believe he will be very well in UTP, and I'm sure that he can contribute further especially in the aspect of teaching and learning in
UNIMAP, Prof. UNIMAP.
UNIMAP. Sorry, UNIMAP. UNIMAP. So right, so very briefly about Dr. Tazli. So without further ado, Dr. Tazli, I pass over the session to you. Silakan.
Thank you very much, Prof. Karim, for the introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning to everyone. So we meet again. For those who have actually attended the session last week, I hope that you have a fruitful one. I also, from the reflections that you share, I feel humble in any way that there are actually many educators out there who still have the core passion as the educators. And I think with this kind of passion, this is where actually we make the change to the education system in Malaysia, especially, and for our future generation. I think that's very important. I think that is actually what kept me alive, because I wanted to see a reform. I wanted to see a strong change in our education, such that we produce critical thinkers, we produce analytical thinkers, we produce those who are actually not only good or excellent in academics, but also in terms of their values, in terms of their skills as well. So those are the things that really what makes me wanted to go alive. And I think with regards to this topic today, on actually strategies of preparing high order thinking skills assessment, I feel that it is very important, because not only that we want to protect the integrity of the education. It's not that we're going to protect the integrity of our students, but at the same time we want to make sure that we produce this kind of students who have these critical thinkers, critical thinking, analytical thinking, be able to make sound reasons, for example, be able to solve problems. I think those are the real things that we want to produce, even though we are doing it online during this pandemic. So let me share my screen with you. Okay. So I hope everyone can see right now.
You can see.
Okay. So today, the topic is strategies for preparing higher order thinking skills assessment, HOTS assessment. And the learning outcomes for today's session, there will be 4. First of all is to understand what is HOTS and the guiding principles in creating HOTS assessment. And then the second one is to be able to explain step-by-step guidance to prepare HOTS assessments. The third one, I'll be sharing a little bit on what is actually flip assessment. This is one of the innovation that I did for the past 5 years. And I think it impacted my students. And number 4 is actually to demonstrate HOTS assessment creation as a team. Okay, so these are the things that we're going to do. So from time to time, we'll be actually having what we call as breakout session lah. Ada breakout session that some of you will participate and discuss in a group and solve the problems that I'll give. Okay, so before I proceed with this, I would like you again, this is my favorite part, is actually going to Mentimeter. So can you actually go to, take your mobile, go to www.menti.com and use this code 7939545. 7939545. And can you please answer this question? You can pick more than one actually. Okay. One is actually about asking your experience as a student. Another one is actually asking your experience as the educator. So please take your mobile and respond to this question. So you can start to see the pattern that I believe that yeah, I mean we kind of seeing this pattern regularly. Before this, I have done this kind of what do you call that, polls as well during my session with UMP, University Malaysia Pahang. That but then I can see that there's slightly change here, where actually many of you here had declared that you have done many open-ended assessments before as students, and very few who had been tested open-ended when they were students. Okay, but at the same time here, they are only now, because of the, I think because of the pandemic, that only a few who actually said that I've never give open-ended assessments, but plenty of you said that I sometimes give open-ended assessment to my students. And I think it's a good number as well, saying that you always give open-ended assessment to your students, which is good. Okay. And here that we said that I had done 1 to 2 open-ended assessment before as a student. I think most of us can relate to, for example, final year project, which is very open-ended. We can relate to actually design project, which is also open-ended. But how about other assignments? For example, that is it like a textbook assignments, or is it like assignments which is complex enough that it could not be done by, you know, by closing the book. So it had to be an open book. Okay, that's a good response. We have 159 participants have responded, 60 today, which we can see the trend that you had now give open-ended assessment to your student. That's very good. Okay, let me bring back. So today, in the outline session that I'll be discussing, there are a few things that I'll be talking about. One is actually what is HOTS from the perspective of Bloom taxonomy as well as Solo taxonomy. And then I will recap back the guiding principles which I have shared with you last week. And then I'll be sharing with you about step by step to prepare HOTS assessment and making your students a teacher via flip assessment. So that will be my outline. Okay. So what is HOTS? Okay. So HOTS ni, we always associate that when it comes to Bloom taxonomy, right? I think every one of us, when we are actually as the educators, we were introduced with Bloom taxonomy in order for us to develop assessment. Okay. When we want to develop the assessment, we use the guide word that is being developed by Bloom as well as the revised Bloom taxonomy. Okay, and we know that, okay, for level 1 and level 2, this is considered as low order thinking skills. even up to level 3, sometimes this is still considered as low order thinking skills. Okay, but whenever that we want to develop a high order thinking skills, which means that we are bringing our students towards the ability to analyze, to evaluate, and to create something. Okay, for example, that the students be able to differentiate when they look at the certain data that were given to them. They know what to do with that data because they'll be able to compare. Okay, they'll be able to look at the data, and then they'll be able to differentiate in terms of, for example, from the data that is considered as analyzed. And after that, if they be able to justify on something, they'll be able to make a judgment on the things that were given to them, that is considered as evaluating. And then after that, if let's say they'll be able to design something out of that as part of the solution, okay, so they are reaching the level create. So in order for us to bring the students to the level of what we call as HOTS, high order thinking skills, we need to bring them starting from level 1. We cannot just simply actually make them achieve level 4, 5, 6 without actually making them do the activity of low order thinking skill first. We have to make sure that they reach, they were test, what we call that, they were assessed in terms of the low level, and then we bring them up to the higher level. I think many of us still have what we call that. Many of us still have what we call confusion. For example, right? Okay, let's test only higher education with HOTS, not the kindergarten students, not the primary school student. The thing is, whenever that we want to do HOTS activities, it doesn't differentiate the level of the education of the student. For example, like we can also do HOTS for kindergarten student according to the level. We can also HOTS like what we are doing right now, okay, but even at primary schools, and we also can bring HOTS actually to university students. What I found that the confusion is, for example, like some educators feel that, okay, at the first year student, let's do a lots activities instead of HOTS. The thing is, if let's say you don't bring the HOTS to the even at the lower level, you will actually create a big gap for the students in order for them to reach a higher level later on. So what we need to do right now is actually try to bring up the HOTS, high order thinking skills, even for foundation first, as much as what we're going to do at the final year students. Only then be able to close the gap. So if you remember the scaffolding, which I will recap back to you later on, okay? So the reason being is that we do not want to make a big gap in terms of the thinking process of the student. So that is why whenever that we want to put HOTS, it doesn't depend. It's not directly proportional to the level of education of the students. Even actually for diploma students, for example, or degree students, it doesn't mean that you have to, for example, lower the level of HOTS to at diploma and you want to get them higher at the degree level. That will create a big gap in that sense. Okay, let's have a look at another taxonomy that actually, before that, I would like to bring you to what they call that Paris intellectual development stages here. Okay, what happened is that from Paris, Paris, he actually described that there are 4 levels of intellectual development stages. Okay, the first one, the first one is dualism. For example, like if let's say the students come to you and say that, tell me what I have to learn. Okay, come tell me what I have to learn and then assess me. Okay, so that is considered as what we call as surface learner. Okay, similarly, if let's say the students say that, alah, this semua sama je, everything is the same. Okay, everything is the same, all opinion are the same, no opinion is much better than the other one, for example. So this is still considered as what we call as surface learner. Okay, So everyone has an opinion, so all are equal. Students may distrust authority, reason, abstraction, and science. But when the students started to see, to make reasoning, okay, and then with certain facts and findings, with certain, when they're making some kind of judgment with reasoning, okay, and supported with evidence and facts, so this is where the students start to reach the level of relativism, okay, and this is where actually they become a deep learner. Okay, so there is a question here, is it? I think just now somebody asked, raise up their hand, and do you have any questions?
Yeah, if I can interject, kejap, Tazli.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, for all the participants here, feel free to ask question, but can you please put Q, capital letters Q, in front of the question so that we can easily see which one is a question or which one is just a comment, yeah? Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. No problem. Okay. So, and then the final one is actually the level of commitment. Students realize they must make choices and commit to solutions. Okay. So when they decided that they have to take ownership of it, whenever that they come and learn, they know that this is the reason why they come and study and learn, and they take ownership of it. This is where actually we bring our students to become a deep learner. If let's say the students come to you and say that I think the lecturer didn't teach this at all. For example, when the soalan datang kan, question coming in, I think the lecturer didn't teach at all. This is still considered as a surface learner. Will this be in the exam? Okay, so this is another question of a surface learner. Okay, how I can easily remember this? So that is where actually the students come to you and say, "Sir, I do not know what this is all about. How I can easily remember this?" And then the student will come to you as well. Is this counted for the coursework mark? Okay. And then they say, is it coming in the exam, for example? And they're doing a lot of memorization. So these particular students are still considered as what we call as surface learners. Okay. So, I mean, of course, we as a human, we can become a deep learner to what we are passionate at, and we can become a surface learner to the things that we are least passionate at. For example, like myself, I'm a surface learner to the DIY. I do not like doing DIY much, except okay lah, doing some IKEA punya assembly, fine. But I know that every time I do something on the DIY ni, mesti ada cacat. So even I do not bother much actually for me to really study on the DIY part. So that is my actually, of course, apa kita ada kita punya preferences, kita ada punya what we want and not. But at the same time, students ni they are actually in that particular courses. Okay, so how maybe some students come and say to you that I do not have passion in this, I do not have interest in this, right? But I have no other choice. So, well, we have to mention to the students, you also have no other choice rather than to become yourself, make yourself as a deep learner. You cannot just make yourself as a surface learner, because when you actually as a surface learner, everything you learn is actually at the surface. And the knowledge that you spend throughout 3 years and 4 years is a waste because you're just taking it on the surface. So that is why we wanted to make sure that the students trying to have a deeper understanding and try to become a deep learner. Okay. So another taxonomy that I think is very important for us, especially later on when we want to develop the rubric, and we will also want to assess our students, is what we call as structure of observed learning outcomes, solo taxonomy. Okay, solo taxonomy ni dia different sikit dengan Bloom taxonomy is that the Bloom taxonomy, okay, it is based on the cognitive level lah, on the cognitive development. Okay, for example, like level of understanding until level of creation, for example. But the solo taxonomy is actually based on our observation on the learning outcome, whether the students achieve or not. For example, like I always shared an example of ada satu video. There is one video that we always use for, what do you call that? Always use for active learning training. We always use that for active learning training. That is being developed by John Biggs, okay? That video from Denmark. Dalam question tu, in order for us to differentiate which category belong to which category, which student belong to which particular solo taxonomy level ni, okay? Because they have a pre-structural level, unistructural level, multi-structural, relational, as well as the extended abstract level, okay? So they ask a question, what is a cow? Okay, lembu tu apa? Lembu tu apa? And then on the pre-structural level, dia akan jawab, you don't, not sure, I'm not sure. Okay, so you gantilah soalan tu lembu tu apa kepada benda-benda lain that you are teaching, right? So if let's say the students are clueless and do not have any answer to that, so this is what we call as pre-structural level, which means that he or she is not sure about the subject. Okay. Another level is that unistructural level. Okay. And then there is a question. What is a cow? Lembu tu apa? Okay. I have one idea about the subject. The cow, it is when it is milking. For example, lembu itu ialah apabila ia memberi susu. So which means that kalau kita tanya balik, cat pun beri susu kan? Okay. It's not only lembu, tapi they only have one answer to that. So this is what we call as unistructural level. And then for those who have multi-structural level is when actually, when you ask the question, what is a cow? A cow, when it is alive, it gives us milk, okay? And then when we slaughtered them, it gives us fat, it gives us meats. So those are the things that they classified. So they're starting to make classification. But again, this is what we call as multi-structural level. I have several ideas about this subject. So, but then these two answer is what we call as surface understanding. Okay, and the first one ni tadi, no understanding at all. When they enter the fourth relational level, we call it, I can link my ideas together to see the big picture. Again, they ask question, what is a cow? A cow is blah, 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 blah. Okay, dia jawab. And then there is a difference between Angus and Hershey cows, for example. Angus cow is relatively big, I cannot remember, small ke big, relatively big with but give and then which means that we give a large amount of meat, but the amount of milk is small. Okay, the quantity of milk is small. But the another type of cow, they say Angus cow, for example, Hershey cow, relatively small but give a lot of milk, for example. So they started to make some kind of relational level, started to make some kind of comparison. Okay, so that is they started to link the ideas together to see the big picture. And another level is that they can look at ideas in a new and different ways. For example, again, when you ask the question, what is a cow? They can explain what is a cow is all about. But at the same time, they kata, I found that there is a similarity between the DNA of the cow and DNA of human. Because DNA of a cow, they have a lot of varieties. Ada different types, ada different size, ada different colors. Similar with human have different size, different color, and so on, etc., etc. Which means that they are bringing us towards a standard abstract level. They just start to make relation with things that it is out of the topics that we are using. Okay? So the question, can we use this solo taxonomy as reference in developing our assessments rubric? Definitely yes. So that is why I brought in solo taxonomy. So whenever that we want to develop the rubric, is about assessing the performance of the students based on the level that the students has achieved, based on the observation of the learning outcome that they have achieved. So this could be actually included in our rubric. So I'll be sharing with you the rubric later on. Okay. So when we actually bring the students to a relational level as well as at the extended abstract level, so we are actually making the students to have deep understanding. So this is what is solo taxonomy all about. So whenever, if let's say we combine the Bloom taxonomy as well as solo taxonomy, these two things is a very powerful framework atau powerful tool that we can use actually, that we can develop a suitable assessments for our student as well as suitable rubric for our students later on. Okay. So let me bring you back to the guiding principles, so that we can recap back what we have understand about certain guiding principles in the past. As I want to highlight here is that there are actually plenty of guiding principles out there. There are plenty out there. There are many that has been researched by our educationists in the past. I myself am not an educationist, but I take whatever that it is actually suitable for me and I explore from that. Okay, so there are plenty out there. I think later the educationists, for example, like Dr. Azida and my other friends who can also share what are other framework that could be done actually in order for us to develop suitable instruction as well assessment. But for me, I hold into three things. One is actually the constructive alignment, because I think in MQA requirement, even at higher education, there are lots of time that we actually use constructive alignment. The second one is on the how people learn framework, okay? And the third one is on the scaffolding part. Uh, ajak geng. Okay, okay, as a recap, first guiding principle is actually the constructive alignment, which actually has been introduced by Professor John Biggs in 1999. So basically, he introduced three elements, three components here. One is actually the learning outcomes. Okay, the second one is the teaching and learning activities, as well as the third one is assessment. What it is being highlighted is that the intended outcomes must clearly be indicated. This is where actually we always use Bloom taxonomy to highlight the outcomes, right? For example, like to students to be able to apply on something, students be able to analyze on something, students be able to create something out of that. Okay, so we actually spell out our learning outcomes. And we have actually teaching and learning activities, which is we have to conduct the teaching and learning activities which match the outcomes, as well as we have the assessment. For example, the assess intended outcomes. Most of the time, this is based on my observation. Based on my observation in the past, that I've seen that we clearly have spell out our learning outcomes very, very well. Okay, if let's say we refer to the MQA document too, it is spelled out. I think it can be done well lah. For example, like okay, the spell out of the outcomes, we clearly use the guide words and so on. And then when we do the assessment, okay, we create questions and we use the guide word of the Bloom taxonomy very well. Okay, so discuss. Okay, when we say discuss ni, what level we are trying to bring in. Okay, and then we say describe. Okay, describe ni level 2, for example, that we have decided. Okay, calculate this. Calculate is always something level related to level 3. But this is again based on my observation, maybe not at the university, but it happened somewhere else. Okay, I can see that actually whenever that we are developing learning outcomes, first it is not aligned with the assessment. Sometimes we assess something else, okay, but our learning outcome reflect on something else. For example, like we always stuck, okay, because this is my first year course, I shouldn't give too much high order thinking skill question. I should give a lot of lots. Whereas in our learning outcome, we spell out that the learning outcome need a lot of it is actually on higher level. So that is not aligned. Okay, there is a question. What if we ask question, taxonomy remember level and it is open book exam because students can access all the materials during pandemic? Then students can easily get full mark for that question. Yes, I think that is the reason why in the open-ended assessment is usually what we call it on assessing on the HOTS level, higher order thinking skills. It's not really if let's say we are doing open book exam for the low order thinking skills, it doesn't defeat the purpose because it allows the students to copy. Okay, because the answer is in the textbook. So that's the idea today, that whenever that we want to develop open-ended questions, it has to be HOTS. It has to be higher order thinking skills related question. So coming back to actually the learning outcome as well as the assessment, okay, the learning outcome assessment, I can see that sometimes it is not matched. sometimes it is matched, okay? The learning outcomes as well as the assessment are matched with each other. For example, that we want the students to perform, like for example, my subject, to be able to perform material and energy balances, for example. So in the assessment, I put up the questions so that the students should be able to perform material and energy balances, okay? But when it comes, what is always not being aligned is that the teaching and learning activities. Okay, if let's say we want to make sure that the students, okay, are being activated, for example, like to be able to perform on something, students be able to demonstrate on something, students be able to create on something, this particular verb need to be activated inside the teaching and learning activities. So if let's say the students are expected to be able to analyze on something, for example. That is the assessment, okay? And you want to measure the assessment so that it meets the learning outcome. But in our class, we just conduct lecture. There is no activity of analysis at all. But in the final assessment, you ask the students to analyze, which means that the students are not be able to answer it very well. So no matter how open-ended that you give, how hot the questions that we give, since we are not actually activating that particular verb in our teaching and learning activities, means that our assessment will not be successfully attempted by our students. Okay, so these are the three things that we need to make sure that it is aligned to each other, and we have to activate the verbs in our class so that the students be able to answer the assessment. So assessment drives learning. So the students, okay, whenever that they learn according to how we assess them. One more thing. For example, like when we give the students, we talk about like pedagogy, something like problem-based learning. We talk something like team-based learning, for example, cooperative learning. And when we give assessments to them, is something like assessment yang even they are doing alone, okay, they can solve it. So they clearly are not satisfied with whatever activities that we put up here. For example, like problem-based or cooperative based, because the assessment is much easier if let's say they just sit in front of the computer or in front of the textbook and do it on their own. So that is also considered as not aligned to each other. So if let's say we are doing problem-based learning or cooperative learning or even like different kind of learning, we must make sure that it fulfills the learning outcomes. Okay, many of us like to use, okay, I've done this in my class, I've done this kind of innovation in my class, I'm doing flipped classroom for my class, for example. But if let's say the flipped classroom is actually to attempt the learning outcome which is on the low order thinking skills, it will give a big trouble to the students. Students will not be really satisfied with it. Students say it's a waste of time because actually just teach me, because you know your assessment is easier. Your assessment is just ask me to remember things. Your assessment is just ask me to explain things. I don't need flipped classroom for that. Okay, so that is very important. Whenever that we decided on the instruction that we want to do in our class, it has to be aligned with the learning outcome that we decided. Okay, so that is the first guiding principles that I hope that now you can understand, because it has been repeated twice, last week and this week. The second one, okay, this is also what I highlighted in How People Learn framework last week. Okay, in order for us to create people who learn, okay, who actually dedicated themselves to learn, okay. So J.D. Bransford in 2000, he has published a book. You can find it, a soft copy of this book actually, How People Learn. I think it's a bit thick, about 200 pages. He actually studied more than 1,000 papers, research work on how people learn, and he came up with this particular lens. Before that, I'm going to address a question. If the learning outcome is LOT, for example, describe, could we include variety of LOT and HOTS item, define, describe, explain, analysis, compare, to measure the LO in the exam and open book tests or online tests? Okay. I think in the first place, if let's say the learning outcome is low order thinking skills, for example, like an awareness to that, we can do some kind of reinforcement towards that particular awareness. For example, we can, of course, there can be an we can include lots and HOTS items, especially when we are doing right now. We are doing online. Okay, when we're doing online, the students are required not actually. We do not want the students to really a copy from the textbook. Okay, if let's say we tested them, we assess them. So of course, some kind of HOTS element can be included there. Okay, as long as it makes the student achieve the learning outcomes that we have specified. Okay, I'll be sharing with you a little bit on the confusion about using this particular guide words as well. Okay, later in the step-by-step HOTS preparation too, because there are certain guide word that has been misunderstood in when we want to actually prepare the assessment. I'll be sharing with you shortly after this. Okay, so whenever that we are doing how people learn framework, okay, this is actually by J.D. Bransford in 2000. He came out with 4 lenses in order for him to measure the he said that the students ataupun the learners, okay, they need to be in these 4 lenses, only then they be able to learn effectively well. Okay, right. So if you're looking at, for example, the learner-centered, knowledge-centered, assessment-centered, and community-centered, these are all interlap with each other, which means that all of these 4 elements must present in our class to make sure that the students really learn. For example, like the knowledge-centered, okay? The knowledge-centered, which is actually allow the students to organize the knowledge outcome around fundamentals of discipline. If let's say the students started to see the relevancy of learning that knowledge, only then they'll be able to learn. For example, like when they start to see that, okay, why I learn additional maths, add maths, and then you relate it with the future utilization of this particular knowledge, then it only makes sense for them, it motivates them to learn. So that is what actually revolve around knowledge-centered. The second one is learner-centered. Okay, learner-centered takes into account learner's background, preconceptions, and connections to real-life context. For example, right now, we're taking into the consideration of the students' punya background. For example, like the psychology part of the students, for example. We understand more about the students punya demographic, for example. We also understand the students punya previous knowledge background. That is considered as learner-centered. We also understand the misconception of the student that have in the past. That is also considered as learner-centered. Okay. Another important part that we shouldn't be missing is actually the assessment-centered lens. For example, here, the students must reflect their learning goals and aid students in getting feedback. For example, here, we can see that the students, in order for them to get feedback, it's not only by giving them tests or giving them final exam. Because sometimes it's too late for them to get the feedback. It's too late for them to get the feedback. The important part is actually whenever that we are doing certain kind of classes, okay, we are doing classes when we're doing some kind of engagement the students during the synchronous session or asynchronous session, we must make sure the students get their feedback. How to ensure that the students get the feedback? This is where actually we give them formative assessment. Something that we do not grade, but at the same time, whenever that we test them, for example, like you put up question in the Mentimeter, ask them to answer. That is considered as assessment. Okay? Or for example, like you give a task for them and then ask them to discuss about the task and after that share in the class. That is not summative assessment, that is considered as formative assessment. And after that, you give feedback to them whether this is okay, this is not okay, this is something that you have to improve, for example. So that is actually what we call as assessment-centered lens. Okay, which means that in order for the students to really learn well, to learn effectively well, the assessment-centered must be there. Another important part that shouldn't be missing is what we call as community-centered. Community-centered is where actually the student and instructor as part of the learning community that supports each other. So this is where actually the students, even though it is done online, that the students know that they are supported by their friends, by the lecturers, by the educators, by the teachers, by the lab technicians surrounding them. For example, like this is a community center, what we call it. If let's say we have somebody else who actually be part, for example, even if we have adjunct lecture, we must make sure that adjunct lecture also become part of the community centered. Only then the students realize that, okay, it's okay to make some mistake, and because somebody will give me feedback, somebody can assess me and correct my mistake. So that is community centered. If the student feels scared to ask question, that's one. If the student feel that they're afraid to make mistake, that is not considered as a safe community for them to learn. Okay, so these are all four lenses that we need to have to make sure that the students are learning. Okay, and the most important part that I want to highlight here is about the assessment centered, where in order for us to develop higher order thinking skills element, okay, in our assessment, we must make sure that also activating the HOTS inside the class. Even our formative assessment have to be HOTS as well. Okay, formative assessment have to be HOTS as well, even though it is not being graded. Okay, so there are questions here. However, enabling HOTS for our courses very much have to be aligned with our VPKs. Thus far, majority of the undergrad courses, if I'm not mistaken, only aims up to C4 mostly. Thus, we are more comfortable setting up assignment or exam up to this level, which is very much does not involve HOTS. Hence, how does we implement HOTS for up to C4 level? Okay, let me bring you back later after on the step-by-step tu. Nanti I'll be sharing with you about that soon. And then, okay, Nurul Huda said, perhaps we need to revise the learning outcome of the courses. For higher education, we shouldn't set the target LOs for outcomes at the LOTS level. I agree with Nurul Huda. For postgrad classes, we have presentation in all the subjects. It is considered okay for HOTS or postgrad. Okay. Okay, I'll be highlighting as well on that later. Soalan HOTS atau LOT adakah perlu berasaskan kepada CLO yang ditentukan dalam kurikulum? Okay, HOTS atau LOTS, yes, it depends on the learning outcome. So what we want to test our students, it depends on the learning outcomes. Intended learning outcome, that is thing that is very important. They call it in, kalau dalam, if let's say we look at the constructive alignment tadi, intended learning outcome must be clearly be indicated. What do we want our students to do in this particular courses, to be able to do in this particular courses, that need to be really highlighted here. The third element that I would like to highlight, the guidance, is actually on what we call as scaffolding. Okay, so what is actually scaffolding? Scaffolding ni is actually, as I highlighted last week, for example, in civil engineering structure, whenever that we want to build a building, a permanent building, then you put a scaffold. So when you put the scaffold, okay, when you put the scaffold, then you want to, after some time, and you remove back that scaffolding. You remove back that scaffolding, okay, because the students, because the building is intact enough to stand on its own. So you can remove that scaffolding. Similarly here, whenever that you want to, the students to be able to achieve certain level, you must put some kind of scaffolding to the students. For example, like in the final exam, okay, in the final exam, you want the students to be able to reach, let's say, level C4 or level C5 to that, okay, to that level. And then, so you have already set in your mind that the kind of final assessments is going to be something reaching this particular level. But you know that your students just started, okay? And of course, if let's say you just teach when they are giving them lecture, so the students, towards the end, they will have a very big gap in order for them to achieve these learning outcomes. So what you have to do is actually to provide some steps, okay, some steps in order for them to reach the level. So how do we provide that particular steps? So this is where actually we'll build up the difficulties to our students. We build up the difficulties, for example, like when we start to give formative assessment. So formative assessment has to be also HOTS level so that the student can reach this level. Whenever that we indulge the student in the discussion, for example, so you mean that you provide them certain scaffold so that they feel safe to answer that, they feel safe to go beyond the textbook, for example, in order for them to solve the problem. Something like you can start to give team quiz, okay, a quiz, an open-ended quiz answered in a team, but you are not assessing them, for example, or you give them just some small little mark so that it doesn't affect the coursework mark, for example. So you can give them so that they'll be able to bring up that difficulty levels until they reach the final parts. Okay, so there is also another question here. By the way, if let's say the participant here, I have 400 over here and as well as in YouTube. If let's say you can see the question and you can also give your own answer, okay? Question from YouTube, can we assess above what CLO intended? For example, like CLO expect C1 in taxonomy Bloom, but most of the questions are C2 and C3. Okay, that is a question there. And then, perlukah HOTS dan LOTS ditentukan dalam PDP sebelum pembinaan soalan peperiksaan? Okay. And then, alright, so there's a question there. Again, there is, I want to highlight here is that there is a confusion between the words that we use. For example, like when we use, the students should be able to describe on something. Okay, when we ask the students to be able to describe on certain things, okay, we always actually type our idea to that the students, whenever they say, okay, students should be able to describe on something, we think that, okay, this is from the textbook, students read the textbook and students describe on their own words. That is actually the word description, right? Okay, but in actual, okay, macam ni. I give the example of what we were asked to write when we in primary schools. Okay, that's a very easy example. Tajuk karangan dia ialah aku sebatang pen ataupun aku sehelai kain. Okay, aku sebatang pen lah. Tajuk karangan dia ialah pada final exam UPSR keluar tajuk aku sebatang pen. Okay. Kalau cikgu tu dalam kelas, if let's say the teachers in the class, okay, dia daripada awal, dia ni pencipta kertas soalan. Okay, dia ni guru pakar yang diminta untuk buat soalan for everyone. Aku sebatang pen. So, what she did is actually, daripada hari pertama lagi, dia dah tahu dah soalan UPSR akan keluar ialah aku sebatang pen. Jadi, dia akan cakap kat student dia, okay student, buat karangan ni, aku sebatang pen. Student pun buatlah, aku sebatang pen, aku sebatang pen, aku sebatang pen. Hari-hari. Sampailah hari PSR dan student tu semua berjaya successfully attempted dapat jawab dengan cemerlang lah. Dari kelas cikgu tu dapat 100% dapat A dalam karangan because everybody be able to answer very well. Aku sebatang pen. My question to you, does the student reach the higher order thinking skills needed? Even though aku sebatang pen tu ialah karangan autobiografi, it is a creation. Okay, kalau kita ikut Bloom taxonomy, it is create, to be able to create an autobiography essay. But my question to you, can you answer? Does the student reach higher order thinking skills or not? Okay, you can answer in the chat. No. Betul tak? Tak berlaku sebenarnya. Okay? Tak berlaku sebenarnya higher order thinking skills development dekat situ. Okay? Because all this while, students has been spoon-fed, yes, and a lot of memorization, student hafal je essay tu, and student be able to answer that particular question perfectly well masa dekat exam. So similarly, if let's say right now, we spell out, especially dekat engineering courses lah kan, spell out, students should be able to apply the equation for several problems. Okay, several ni lah, maksudnya student diberikan some scenario, dia ambil equation, dia letak equation and then dia masukkan number, dia be able to answer that. So what happened is that dalam masa tutorial sepanjang satu semester tu, student ni daripada awal dah diberi, okay, kalau problem macam ni, pakai equation ni, jawab macam ni. Problem macam ni, equation macam ni, problem macam ni, equation macam ni. Tapi masa final exam, keluar problem yang hampir sama, tapi student dah tahu dah, okay, I'm just gonna use this equation. Okay, I'm gonna just put some numbers and calculate. So does the student reach the level of application or not? So that is the issue when actually we say, okay, we want to actually
we want to actually, what do you call that? Nak tailor-make our intended outcomes tu dengan assessment. But the problem is, okay, the problem is whenever that we are doing our activities dalam kelas tadi, sebenarnya kita telah menjatuhkan level yang sepatutnya HOTS tu, dia jadi low order thinking skills. Which means that kita jangan terlalu bergantung kepada guide word yang kita nak guna tu, tapi at the same time sebenarnya kita telah menjadikan guide word tu low order thinking skill. Of course, towards the end, students successfully applied the equation, but they do not reach the level of that taxonomy. Bearing in mind that, okay, bearing in mind, kalau kita nak bawa student, for example, towards the level of analysis on something. So in order for the students to be able to analysis on something, they must go through the level of low order thinking skill dulu baru they reach that analysis level. For example, like first of all, they need to be remembered. They need to remember on certain things. Second one, they need to understand, be able to describe on things. And then third one, they should be able to apply on something. Barulah they reach dia punya analysis level tersebut. Okay, barulah they reach the analysis level tersebut. Those are the things that we need to bring them up dalam kelas so that they be able to reach this particular level. So do not tie down with the verbs so much sebenarnya when we want to assess the student. The important part is we ask ourselves, whenever that we are giving the students certain kind of assessment, is it really a HOTS kind of question? Okay? Because if let's say you have trained them throughout the semester, bagilah soalan macam create prototype whatsoever. If let's say you have already, okay, you dah bagi guide kat dia orang, kalau nak buat prototype, buat macam ni, buat macam ni, buat macam ni. Final exam, keluar soalan, okay, create prototype macam tu. Tapi the student already know the answer because they do not have to think about it and they just buat. Create lah dapat prototype tersebut. Create prototype is a level 6 tapi sebenarnya you dah jatuhkan dia sampai dah level paling bawah. Okay? So that I think that is a lot of confusion about us when we actually wanted to create a high order thinking skills, but at the same time we are doing a lot of activities that sebenarnya bringing down the verb to a low level, low order thinking skills. So so the question is, how do we define difficulty level? Does difficulty level go linearly with the Bloom taxonomy? Yes, indeed. But in order for you to be very sure that the students be able to reach that high order thinking skills, they must go throughout the process. Maksudnya, the students punya understanding tu must go from level 1 until then they reach level 4. If let's say the students tak sampai pun, if let's say the students are doing things which actually dia kata level 4, doing some analysis, tapi you actually do the analysis all the time. Maksudnya you give the same set of the data, student nampak pun student dah tahu what will be the answer of this question. That is not considered as HOTS punya questions. Okay? Alright, so a little bit on the zone of proximal development here. Okay? Zone of proximal development here is actually as what Prof. Karim highlighted here, is the distance between children can do by themselves and the next learning that can be helped to achieve with competent assistant. Okay. Saya ambil contohnya macam ni lah. Maksudnya students tu nak petik buah dekat pokok. So for example, like you put stairs for them to be able to reach that fruit. Tapi lama-lama students akan naik, student akan membesar contohnya. They do not need that stairs anymore in order for them to pick the fruits, for example. So, and then you remove that stairs. So that is actually considered as you assist them to be able to reach that level. So similarly here, if we imagine that, okay, this is difficulty level of performance, which means that imagine that you are putting guide words yang higher. Guide words you ialah actually analysis ataupun evaluation ataupun creation. So you are making a steps for them in order for them to reach higher level dekat sini. You are actually making step for them and later on you pull it out. Okay? Oh, soalan banyak ni, tak sempat habis ni. Okay, the question is, kalau di sekolah cikgu banyak bagi kerja sekolah dan latihan kepada murid-murid, tapi di universiti bilangan assessment yang kita beri kepada pelajar perlu ikut seperti dalam BPK. If not, we will burden the student with too many assessment. I believe to develop HOTS, pelajar perlu latihan berterusan, mohon pandangan tuan. Saya tidak bersetuju dengan memberi assessment yang banyak. Saya tidak bersetuju dengan memberi, it's a continuous assessment, correct, but memberi dengan memberikan directly proportionate dengan assignment yang banyak, I don't agree with that. Okay, what I feel that whenever that you want to give assessment to the students, if let's say you want to give the assessment student, ialah assessment yang untuk menilai whether they have achieved the learning outcomes or not. Okay, if let's say you give them too many assessments, again, it is surely is burdening to the students. What you can do a lot is actually a lot of formative assessments. A lot of formative assessment whenever, especially whenever that you have a live session with the students. Okay, for example, like whenever that you have a session with the class, the student in the class, this is the time for them, for you to trigger their HOTS level, for you to nurture their HOTS level. It is not outside of the class. Outside of the class, you can give certain assignments for them, okay, as a take-home punya assignment, but it doesn't have to be what they call that, a lot of some summative assessment yang they have to submit to you. You have burden to mark, at the same time they are also burdened with answering the assessment, because the most important part is you want to know whether the student have achieved the outcomes or not. That is very important. Okay, again, yes, it must be within the range of SLT. Prof, jika hasil pembelajaran kursus berkenaan adalah aras kognitif situ, adakah saya berada di lasan yang betul apabila mengadakan aktiviti PDP yang mengukur prestasi pelajar? I think these are the things that sometimes you need to ask back yourself, because all this while, we are actually giving a lot of question which ask the students to memorize. But now, then this comes online learning. Okay, so we have to answer back to ourselves whether is this sufficient enough for us to assess the students. For example, like is it a C1 and C2 is sufficient enough for us to put in our learning outcomes? If let's say we just want the students to have a surface understanding to the topics, that is fine. But when you start to feel that the students need to, for example, to be able to apply it, because the knowledge that the students need to know is to apply it, and at the same time students need to use it in the future, do you think that by giving this kind of learning outcome is sufficient? Maybe it is timely enough for us to rework back on that particular learning outcome, course learning outcome that has spelled out. Okay. Question from YouTube, procedure knowledge, for example, step to perform hypothesis is considered application or understanding, since in the assessment student apply the steps to similar problem. Okay. Soalan tadi. Procedural knowledge, for example, steps to perform hypothesis is considered applications or understanding, since in the assessment student apply the steps to similar problem. Okay. Again, if let's say you are giving them similar, for example, like you give them a problem ataupun an assessment, for example, like they just need to rearrange ataupun state back the procedural knowledge that they can just copy from textbook. Okay, so that is considered as what do you call that? That is considered as soalan terbawa ke belakang. Okay, that is considered as C2, which is the students be able to describe on something. For example, that you give them some statements, okay, and then students just pick up which particularly procedural that they can use in order for them to solve the problem. So that is considered as level C2. Okay, yes, Prof, short break. Saya baru habis bahagian scaffolding. Yes, and Dr. Samsul betul, masih lagi dekat scaffolding. So later on, I'll be moving towards step by step to prepare HOTS assessment. Okay, let's have a break for now, 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay, 5 minutes. Oh, it's really very solid knowledge.
Soalan banyak.
Yeah. We have about 116 people on YouTube.
Okay.
So it's a big group. Very good.
Big group, bro.
A lot of learning. And beautiful slide as well.
Thanks to Don. Don buatkan.
Oh, sit down.
Dia kata slide saya buruk. So dia
Okay, Don. Thank you to you, Don. We recorded here on YouTube and on this video.
So kita start balik, I think 10 lah Prof. Kita bagi.
Okay. So tu kata Dr. Tazli boleh minum Ningxia dulu. Alright. Saya pun
Okay.
nak tengok cucu dia datang kat bawah tu.
Alright. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, inshallah. The slide I'll be sharing with you after this lah. I think I'll share it to CDAE, and then they will share with everyone. I think they're gonna put in YouTube later on. Okay, we are back to this sharing session, okay, on the strategies for preparing HOTS assessment. Okay, so I'll be sharing with you, this is going to be a bit longer on the step-by-step to prepare HOTS assessment. Okay, they are actually all together. Before that, okay, I just wanted to test you. Let's go to menti.com. Go to menti.com. Okay, I would like you to actually have a look at these particular outcomes. And when you are actually using this, for example, like if let's say you have this particular outcome, so what do you think, what kind of assessment that you can use in order for you to meet this outcome? Okay, to apply analytical and theoretical skills to solve mathematical problems. To apply analytical and theoretical skills to solve mathematical problems. So which one that you think that assessments, type of assignment that you can give to the student so that you can meet this particular outcome? So you can go to www.menti.com and use this code 7939545. Okay, while everyone is trying to respond to this Mentimeter, there is a question here. Assalamualaikum Dr. Tazli and Prof. Jika soalan apply knowledge pada case untuk such a solution tapi kita train cara attempt, adakah ia low order thinking skill? It could be. It could be actually make the students jadi low order thinking skills because when actually we have to actually decide. Okay, we go back to the framework, to the guidance that I give earlier on the scaffolding. There are two different things in actually sometimes we about scaffolding ni. Satu scaffolding, satu spoon feeding. Okay, so katalah kalau kita memberi contohnya pada attempt yang pertama that we give them ways how to solve the case study, and the next session we do not repeat the same thing but actually we reduce little bit content dalam kita punya solution, then that is where actually we started to remove a little bit of the scaffold. Okay, maksudnya kita bagi hints ataupun kita bagi cues sahaja so that the students be able to think better and better, only then they be able to apply in their final assessment. Tapi kalau setiap kali datang soalan yang berbeza, case study yang berbeza, tapi kita punya method ialah kita bagi juga train dia orang cara menjawab in a complete way, so that is no longer considered as scaffolding. That is spoon feeding. Jadi ia telah menyebabkan the level of apply, sepatutnya apply tadi kita dah bawa dia kepada level maybe C2 or C1. Maybe just remember je. They just remember, petik some one or two things and be able to attempt it as application. So that's no longer considered as hot question. Okay. Question from YouTube: at university level, we are having challenges to develop reasoning skills at C2 level. For example, interpret the computed value statistic classes, although we did the examples in the class. I think reasoning skills, when you mention about this, in interpretation, for example, is no longer considered as this is not C2 actually. Whenever the example that you give here, this is actually bringing the students to level C4 and C5. For example, like they have the computed value, statistics, and then the students need to do their own reasoning, okay? Judgment based on the values that they see. So this is actually you bringing the students to level C5, so it's not C2. Kalau level C2 ni, ialah for example like when you are teaching right now, for example when I'm teaching right now, and somebody be able to make some kind of summary of what I teach, that is actually C2. Just summarize balik ataupun just describe balik what have been done. So that is a C2 level. Okay, so many of you feel that to apply analytical and theoretical skills to solve mathematical problems can be given by software simulation, can be given by case studies or role play, as well as group project. Not so much you feel on the reflective writing, not so much you feel on the essay writing. Okay, it could be done, but it's a bit tricky, but a bit more challenges. But for example, like if let's say you want the students to be able to apply theoretical skills, and if let's say it's a bit more complex, then you can give it as part of the group project. And when the students doing the group project, then they start to write down the reflection of what they are doing. That could be coupled together. They can also, you can also give them case studies. That's good. That's true, as well as software simulation. For example, like you ask them, you give them a case study, and you ask them to use software in order for them to solve it using the analytical and theoretical skills that they have got before in the class. So there's something that you may think about, which is good. I mean, I could agree with you. MCQ, maybe you can use it, but again, not so much maybe, not because you are bringing the level to the students to be able to apply something. It could be done by MCQ, but if let's say you really want the students to bring them to a higher level, you may want to give them some kind of open-ended assessment as well. So that is one learning outcome. Let's have a look at second learning outcome: to interpret, compare and contrast ideas in the theology studies. Theology tahu kan? Religious comparison kan? So which one do you think that could be done? What kind of assignment that we could give to our students? I think Dr. Saiful Bahri, thank you, Dr. PM Dr. Saiful Bahri have highlighted here. In the assessments, 2 points should be considered. One, expertise reversal effects, as well as challenge points. If any skills have been mastered by the students, the assessment should give more challenge because the student have mastered the skills. And if give repeated skill, will look like lower order skills, though it is high order ideal skill. I agree with you, Dr. Saiful. Thank you very much for sharing this. So if we keep repeating things, students sudah already achieve the level. So actually you're bringing them down. So the students will lose interest in their learning as well. I think I reflected back my experience masa dulu darjah 1 kan. Masa darjah 1 dulu. I think masa during that time I'm able to read books at 4 years old. Umur 4 tahun. And then masa darjah 1, I think I know many of the things already lah. Lepas tu bila masuk dalam kelas, cikgu dah cikgu bagi benda yang sama, keep giving the same things. Until I think my mom came to the school and then cakap dengan cikgu, dia cakap, cikgu, Tazli ni dia dah nampak boring sikit dalam kelas. Would you be able to give some kind of challenge for him? Something like that. So the good thing about this teacher is she challenged me. Okay, she challenged me. She give a much complex question. For example, like macam maths question tu jadi lebih kompleks. Of course, you feel that macam, takkan budak ni dapat special treatment. It's not a special treatment kan? Tapi consider that if let's say you are doing it to your student, if you know that some of the students, again, as I mentioned about scaffolding, some of the students do, they just need 3 to 4 steps to be able to reach the intended outcome. Some of the students, they need 15 steps in order for them to reach that outcome. So if we be able to give some kind of challenge to our student, again, of course, you cannot do that as part of summative assessment. But it's actually, if you really care about the students' learning, this is where actually you give some kind of challenge to the students. Okay, some kind of challenge so that the students be able to, feel motivated in their own learning experience. These are the things that we need to really understand. This is the thing that we need to realize because not all the students are the same. Students are not the same. Students are not uniform. So you cannot just simply give them a uniform kind of assessment. Especially, you can challenge them more in what we call as formative assessment. Okay, so this many of you feel that reflective writing as well as group project could be done in order for us to attempt this learning outcome. We can also give case studies as well as essay writing. Yeah, not so much on software simulation. MCQ pun not really much triggering ability to compare and contrast because it's more open-ended and lots of grey area kat sini kan. Okay. Next assessment, next learning outcome, to demonstrate effective negotiating skills among peers. Okay. So what are the possible assessment that you could give here? Or if let's say you have any more idea, what are other assignment that could be given, can you write down in the chat section? Can you give suggestions, suitable apps for reflective writing? To Dr. Azam, all this while I've been using Padlet. Tapi Padlet dia ada limited capacity. What you can do, there's what call that, one of the hacks for this Padlet ni, whenever that you finish session with students, archive it so that you can create a new Padlet. Kalau tidak, nanti dia akan penuh and then you have to subscribe to the Padlet Pro. If let's say you didn't use that regularly lah, but for me, I subscribe to Padlet Pro because I use it most of the time. And it's 12 ringgit. It's 12 ringgit per month. It's 144 ringgit a year. Okay, so you feel that to demonstrate effective negotiating skill, of course, we need to do a group project, right? So that you can see how effective that they are doing in terms of negotiation. You can also give case studies, role play. So you feel that online question and answer, MCQ semua ni tak berapa lah kan, because it's a big close-ended kind of question. Okay, the next question. To demonstrate the application of effective project management. To demonstrate the application of effective project management. What do you think? What are the best assignment that you can do? So many of you feel that group project could be given so that student can demonstrate effective project management. Okay, you can also give case studies or role play for them, for the students. Actually, again, I feel that this is my opinion. I feel that reflective writing is one area that is always missed out actually. Because people feel that just writing feelings is not is just writing about feelings. It doesn't assess anything. But in reflective writing, I could feel that, okay, this is what I feel. Whenever that I ask my student to reflect, I started to see that the students are more, I can clearly distinguish which particular students are really learning or not. And I think Prof. Karim should also include this, Prof, on the writing reflections, because I think the educators also have challenge to write reflections. Dr. Aisha, thank you for joining. Okay, and that is why, because the students, you can see the honesty from their reflective writings, and even you can see that if let's say you are doing group project, when you can see that the group project is one submission, right? But if let's say you ask the student to write, different student write different reflective writings, you can see their role in that particular group project. So that is why I always couple up the reflective writing together with the group project. But other than that, then you start to see lah, maksudnya kalau kita ada learning outcome yang different things, then we know that it cannot be achieved simply by just doing final exam. Okay. Another learning outcomes here. I think last one good. To create HOTS question in the final exam. So this is especially pada faculty education contohnya kan. How do you actually, which particular question, what kind of assessment that you give to the student so that they be able to create HOTS question. If let's say I am a teacher right now, I'm a lecturer and you are my students, which particular assignment that you think should fit you if I ask you to create HOTS question in the final exam? I know, I just want to say final exam, that's all. My learning outcome is I want my students right now, I have 458 plus 300 more dekat YouTube tu, to be able to create HOTS question in the final exam. So how do I assess them? What kind of assessment that I should use to make sure that the participants here, later on, they'll be able to create final exam? So many of you feel that it should be essay writing. Also, some of them say reflective writing, online question and answers. Not so much group project. Tak apa, sekejap lagi saya bagi group project. Okay. Alright. The idea of giving this particular outcomes to you, okay, the idea of giving this particular learning outcome so that you can decide which particular assignments that you can choose. It's just highlighted here is that you don't need to have final examination to make sure that your student reach the learning outcome. Betul tak? Maksudnya, you don't need a writing examination pun towards the end. Some of our courses. Can you agree with me? Right? Even sometimes you can just make a continuous authentic assessment, alternative assessment sampai daripada awal semester sampai habis without giving them, okay, this is a final written examination. Doesn't have to. But of course, we need to defend lah in terms of, for example, like when we decide of learning outcome, macam mana kita nak measure that particular learning outcome? Which particular assessment? What kind of assignment that you want to use in order for us to measure that learning outcome? I myself, my background is an engineer. I do not buy in, for example, like asking my student to have a closed book exam. Although there is a regulation set up by the university, for example, something like that. For me personally, my feeling tu, dia kata macam perasaan tu rasa tak sedap kalau selagi mana when you still give a writing a close-ended exam. Because one thing, as an engineer, whenever you have a problem, you need to solve it as a team, right? And mana ada orang ada problem, tutup buku. Everybody must open book. And open not only one book, right? They have to open many books in order for them to solve that particular problems. So that's why I feel that sebenarnya macam writing examination there are limitations on that. It's easier to marks, of course. It's easier to grade because we have a marking scheme. But at the same time, if we answer kita tanya balik diri kita, adakah dia mencapai outcome yang kita nak? Okay, adakah dia mencapai outcome yang kita betul-betul nak student kita capai? So those are the things that we have to think about it. Okay, sepatutnya when we actually have our own course, we actually own that course. We own that course. We have our own intended outcomes, apa yang nak student tu capai, and we should be able to defend, for example, what kind of assessments that we're doing in our course reflected balik dengan outcomes yang kita nak capai. Okay, so that is my take home, something like that I want to share with you lah. In terms of here, what I'm trying to highlight here is that we shouldn't be too much bogged down dengan writing written final examination. There are always many things that we can do inside our class to make sure that our students achieve the learning outcome, the intended learning outcome that we want. All right. Let's move back to the slides. Ni anak saya sebenarnya jadi model. Okay, right. So, if you are referring to this particular website, type of assessment activities kat sini, you can actually have a look at the intended learning outcomes as suggested by Nightingale 2006, as well as all the learning outcome that's spelled out here. And then you can start have an observation about what kind of assignments that you could give to the students as part of the alternative assessment. Okay, for example, like if you want your students to be able to thinking critically and making judgment, you can give them article, case study, essay, practical experiment, project, and report. If let's say you want the students to demonstrate knowledge and understanding, so there are many things that they can do. If let's say you want them to design, create, or perform, so they need only then to be able to do project and report. So you can see that for level C6 kat sini kan, designing and creation is level C6, belum taxonomy. So if let's say we spell out our learning taxonomy is about designing and creating, we should know that it couldn't be attempted by writing final examination. It could not be done so. It can only be done by doing project or report or something that they need to show, okay, instead of final exam. Final exam doesn't help in ensuring our student reach these particular outcomes. For example, performing procedures and demonstrating techniques. Again, this is practical experiment. So macam because right now, because of COVID, students cannot do hands-on lab. Memang tak boleh lah. So you cannot simply substitute by student watching how other people do the experimental work and then say that we have achieved this outcome. It cannot be done so. Student need to touch the equipment, the student need to touch the equipment. So they need to wait until they come back. Okay. Do you agree that it's possible to ask HOTS using MCQ? Yes, I agree. I think Prof. Karim has shared a link earlier about how to prepare MCQ questions, and it could be done so. But I think it can be done only up to level C4, which means that they need to do some kind of analysis. Only then they can put up the answer. If you ask them to do some kind of comparison, judgment, evaluation, it could not be done, which is C5, it could not be done by MCQ because MCQ you have a very limited choice kat situ. Okay. All right. So the next slide is, again, you can also have ILO such as assessing and managing information, managing and developing oneself, as well as communicating. So you can pick either kind of assessment that it could be done. I mean, this kind of assessment could be used, could be adopted to ensure that the students achieve the learning outcomes. Okay, I have an activity right now okay, which we're going to do for 30 minutes. So what I'm gonna do is actually, I'm going to ask you to be in the breakout session. For those in YouTube as well, you can do it on your own later and you can upload your solution later. So this is gonna be a lot. I'm gonna break you, I think, because we have 455 here. Participants maybe about, I think, if let's say we have, let's say me do some calculation first. That's a lot of group, tapi tak apa, kita try. It's okay. So that everybody can participate and discuss about it. Okay. So let me read first the team activity. Okay. You and your team members are required to develop a team-based summative assessment for subject living skills, kemahiran hidup. And the duration to attempt this assessment is between 2 to 4 hours. Maksudnya, you give the student an assessment that they need to do between 2 to 4 hours. So the learning outcome to be achieved by the student taking this subject are as follows: to propose the best and effective method for cleaning the living room. Okay, so that the students be able to propose. In your breakout team, appoint a moderator and a recorder. Prepare the draft of this assessment using document or PowerPoint and specify the method of assessment. Maksudnya, what kind of assessment that you want to use. And you can post your prepared question ni, the instruction ni that you prepared in https://padlet.com/krdutp/hots. So maybe CDAE can copy this address because the task is also there. You can click the task there. So what I'm gonna do in 1 minute or 2 minutes is actually I'm going to break you out into several groups, and then later that you can discuss in the group. Okay, but then there is a question here. Mohon pendapat Prof berkenaan dengan syllabus telah dimasukkan dengan kaedah pelaksanaan assessment khas untuk subjek tersebut. Jika tidak tambah lagi assessment seperti tambahan group project, tambahan essay question lain, adakah ia akan menambahkan student learning time bagi subjek tersebut? Actually, these are some things that you need to discuss with the school or discuss with the faculty level, discuss at the departmental level, because the course outcome is something that it is not static. Okay, course outcome, the learning outcome, courses too, is not static. It's something that you feel that, okay, because of the current needs that you need to change, then you change. And then you bring it up to the higher level so that you be able to dapat endorsement. Okay, so only then you be able to do it. Kalau tidak, kalau tidak, we are not be able to, what do you call that? Kalau tidak, sampai bila-bila we are stuck with that document, and we have to deliver with that document because sometimes the document too, it can be changed. So if you feel that because you are the owner of the course, if you need to change, then change and bring it to the necessary level to get the endorsement and approval. As long as you have a solid reasoning, it could be changed. Okay. Of course, you don't add up to things, but you must make sure that it is fulfilling the SLT and all those kind of things. Okay, so I'm going to break you out right now. Let me check first. Okay. Okay, so we are moving to our breakout session right now, and we have roughly about 30 minutes lah for us to solve it. Okay, you can copy the link that already in the chat.
Hi everybody.
Zana, can you help May Lakshmi there? Register my attendance.
Prof,
Prof,
attendance
saya ada
nanti
masalah
kita
line.
bagi
Line saya
time
tak
pass.
stabil.
I thought to go into the breakout attendance.
Saya tak dengar lah suara Prof.
Oh no, sorry. Apa ni? Tak, attendance. What does it mean by attendance? Is it to join the breakout room or what? May Lakshmi there.
Breakout session ni Dr. Tazli yang create, Prof.
Oh, I see. So semua dah go into the breakout lah eh?
Sepatutnya lah.
Okay.
actually what kind of instruction that you give to the student so that you can achieve the learning outcome. So kalau kita tengok kat sini, they are sharing here group project and presentation. Form a group of 4 to 5 people and choose your group leader. Produce a short report on the topic above. Distribute the task so you can complete this within 4 hours. In your report, you must highlight the following item. What are the techniques in cleaning the living room? Advantage and disadvantage of each technique. Propose the best and effective technique by giving justification. Present your project. Okay, so this is one of the tasks given. Breakout session number 9 is actually to propose the best and effective method for cleaning the living room. So assessment method is the video project. Gather a group of 4 to 5, reflect the cleaning methods taught in this course, okay. Propose the best and effective method for cleaning the living room, create a video presentation. So, terus datang dengan rubric. Okay, because rubric is supposed to be second, but that is okay, never mind if you have done it. I also think that rubric ni part tu kita tak sempat nak buat. And then breakout session 42, dia punya suggestion, students are required to work as a group of 5. You are then needed to brainstorm with your members what are the possible methods for cleaning the living room. Later, you and members are required to decide on the best and effective method for cleaning the living room. Do deductive thinking from your brainstorming and provide rationale why the one method proposed is the best. Okay, so that is breakout session 42. Let me check breakout session 40 ni, dia baru upload. Dia buat dalam PowerPoint. So from here, dia punya prepare your learners for summative assessment. Okay, yang ni bukan ni copy ni. Okay. Cleaning the living room. When do you do the cleaning? Why cleanliness is important? So you put up the question kat sini. Okay. Let me check. Another group. Genie-based Grab made outsource. Learning outcome to be able to Google, find and hire a respectable Genie-based Grab made ala Jello made in Manhattan. Ni mesti kat OD ni. Group kat OD. Okay, instruction. Buat je lah video TikTok yang menarik dan boleh viral stimulation dalam grup TikTok. Okay, this is out of box punya assessment. Wonderful. Okay, and then this one is actually task is, let me check lagi. You'll be given a space as your living room, design and create your dream living room based on your taste and creativity. Explain how you're going to maintain the design and cleanliness. Okay. Tapi ni tak menjawab soalan. Saya minta it's supposed to be a group task, group based. So dia buat jadi individual project. Yang break session 35, give image on actual room to be clean, give instructions, specific challenges, duration, helper tools, video based, reward for best suggestion, completion of peer review form. Okay. I like this particular group when they start to have a peer review, peer punya assessment. Okay. Maksudnya they evaluate kawan-kawan whether they are participating or not. The group 31, dia kata student will be asked to prepare a short video demonstrating various creative techniques for cleaning the living room. This assignment will be performed in a group of 5 people. One of the member will be the host. Okay. Cuma dia punya dekat sini dia must be able to decide because they need to propose. So dia dah demonstrate various technique tapi they need to propose. Okay. To propose the best, okay, group 30, in a group of 5 students, analyze the issues or problem of the chosen living room, propose the best and effective for cleaning the living room and justify your proposal. Alright, okay. And then instruction to student, you are required to create a video showing the best and effective method to clean the living room for different items in the living room such as sofa, table and TV console. Okay. Ni ada sharing kat sini by words. So let's have a look. Dia kata group activity, 4 members in group. Study the given picture of this messy living room. Provide the best and effective method and suggestion to clean the living room. You should submit the assignment within 2 hours. There are 5 types of cleaning tasks that need to be completed. The following are the items: window and floor, sofa and coffee table, decoration and shelf, clothes, toys and plants. For each of the item, provide the necessary step. So this is actually, you can see some of the assignment given, some of the tasks given. I like this because it's kind of, this is what we call as scenario based. Okay, so you are giving the scenario for the students to answer this. Okay, for the students to answer, and then you give this scenario, and then you ask the student to discuss by themselves and provide the cleaning technique. So that this is one of I would consider a good one lah, so that the students can propose, because you have given them one kind of scenario and ask them to do. Okay. The question, can we just focus on lifelong learning, PO7 assessment, even though it is a team-based work, or we have 2 rubrics on PO7 and PO5 teamwork? This one is different. Again, it depends on what is your intended learning outcome. So if let's say you want them to focus on the lifelong learning, so you can give heavy weightage on that, and you can actually assess them for different outcome if let's say it comes to the teamwork. Although that you are giving this task as a team, but it does not necessarily that you are measuring the teamwork as part of the okay, there is a question. Prof, please share how to create the breakout session. Okay lah, saya tunjuk sekejap breakout session kat sini. Kalau dekat Cisco Webex ni, alamak, susah juga sebab dia tak boleh klik dekat sini. I cannot show. Nanti kena buat share lain lah Dr. Fazila. Nanti I'll do different sharing. Prof Karim pun ada kot. Kalau if you have video.
Yeah, actually participant tak boleh nampak Dr. Tazli. Kita punya dia hanya host saja yang nampak untuk.
Betul. Sebab saya nak share pun saya tak boleh nak klik balik dia punya ni. So maybe nanti kena buat video kot. TikTok lah kot share buat breakout buat TikTok tu.
Dia host saja boleh nampak.
Alright. And then ni banyak suggestion kat sini. Okay. One of the things that again, bila you come up with the solution here, I can see some of the good suggestion. So for example, like here you are given a situation problem in your living room. Find the best solution to handle the situation or problem. So the students need to do they call it project or problem based task. And then here is also another assessment. Apa lagi kat sini tak bagi kat sini. Ini dah bagi jawapan, remember and understand. Okay, tak terbaca habis tak apa. So the thing is, when I read through this kind of assessment when you're giving them, okay, especially the online kan, sometimes you have to think about the method of how they could demonstrate it as a team, ataupun how you could benefit leverage on the online punya session, kan? And then for example, like you can share a scenario to them. I think I'm not saying that whatever that you have suggested is right or wrong, but the most important part is whether you need to answer back whether when the words is actually, the guide word here is actually to propose the best and effective method for cleaning in the living room, which means that in order for you to propose, they must have several kind of solution there. So if you think about propose kan, dia dah masuk level berapa kat sini according to the Bloom taxonomy? It's already level berapa? Level 5 kan? Maksudnya they need to evaluate, make some kind of judgment, or it can be level 6 too. Okay, dia dah masuk sampai level atas. Jadi in order for us to bring the student to that particular level, the students need to undergo the process. Dia punya cognitive process tu is actually daripada level 1 sampai ke level 5, baru dia boleh buat that kind of proposed activity. So let's talk about what kind of activity. Okay, if let's say we are giving them some kind of activity, they need to propose on something. So what they need to do, first of all, they need to remember. So dia tahu kat mana kalau dia nak tengok nota, contohnya dia tahu kat mana dia nak tengok. If let's say they are looking at lecture notes, dia tahu kat mana ada lecture notes berkenaan dengan methods of cleaning. Betul tak? You are not teaching them the best way of cleaning. You may teach them, for example, methods of cleaning. Second one, they need to be able to describe. For example, like describe what are the methods of cleaning. Itu dah level 2. Masuk level 3, they need to apply. this is something yang maybe they need to demonstrate. For example, like, okay, one of the student using mop, for example, one of the student using dia pakai kain Norwex ke contohnya kan. One of the student dia pakai apa lagi? Dia pakai penyapu ke contohnya. So as a team kan. So dekat situ ialah level of application yang dimasukkan. Lepas tu bila dia dah buat application, and then for example among themselves they need to talk to each other. Okay, I dah pakai penyapu untuk ni tapi I rasa macam dia tak berapa efektif. Sebab apa? I dah pakai kain lap lantai tapi I rasa tak efektif sebab dia terlalu ambil masa, consume all those kind of thing. Lepas tu ada seorang lagi student dia kata I pakai mop and then this is what I found. And then lepas tu barulah dia masuk level kepada bila dah dapat all this kind of data, barulah dia buat certain kind of analysis. Okay, certain kind of analysis and they make some kind of judgment and proposal. So nampak tak sebenarnya tadi, in order for us to bring the students to that high order thinking skills, you start first with the low order. Maksudnya the students will have to undergo all the series of this guide ni, daripada remember, describe, apply, also on, baru dapat buat proposal kat situ. So whenever that we develop an assessment for the students, we have to think through what are the process that the student had to go through in order for them to solve that problem. Okay, contohnya kalau kita kata kat student, kita terus bagi tajuk, okay, kita bagi assignment kat dia macam ni. This is a scenario, kita bagi gambar juga kat dia, kita bagi gambar kat dia, seperti mana gambar yang ada dalam buku teks, for example. Okay, this is a picture of a messy room, a messy living room, for example, and then you give a picture, which is, it is a similar picture which is already in the textbook, kan? And then you kata kat dia, propose the best method of cleaning this living room. So what happened to the student? Apa yang berlaku kepada student? What is the thinking process that happened behind that? Dia akan cuma buka textbook, dia nampak gambar yang sama, dan dia akan nampak nota-nota yang telah dicatatkan, and then dia terus copy balik lah. Okay, this is the best way of cleaning this messy living room. Adakah dia capai level C5 or C6 tadi? Dia tak capai. Which means that's why kita kena a little bit more creative. If let's say we want to make sure that the students be able to achieve that high order thinking skills. If let's say, katalah dalam textbook dia tunjuk pasal kitchen, tapi kita bagi soalan yang berkaitan ialah dengan living room contohnya. Okay, so and then kita ask them to propose, and we already introduce the method of cleaning things in the kitchen. That could achieve a higher order thinking skill punya question. Maksudnya we put up a different scenario to that, and the students be able to apply that particular knowledge. Okay, saya selalu, I'm sorry that sometimes I use a primary school ataupun secondary school punya example. It's much easier because everybody here teaching different courses, different disciplines. So we may comprehend better by using this kind of examples, right? Another example that I would like to share about what is actually HOTS ni sebenarnya. I think ada soalan yang saya pernah come across. Dia soalan berkaitan dengan contohnya macam apa? Peribahasa. Students need to understand about peribahasa. Malu bertanya sesat jalan sepatutnya. That's the answer that they want. Tapi apa yang dia buat, dia letak gambar. Dalam satu gambar tu ada satu kereta, dia tak boleh nak jalan dah sebab ada tanah runtuh. And then lepas tu dia tanya peribahasa yang sesuai dengan senario tersebut. And lepas tu bila kita pun confused as an adult pun, bila kita tengok what kind of peribahasa yang sesuai dengan ni. Oh, rupa-rupanya dia nak jawapan ni ialah malu bertanya sesat jalan. Which I feel that is not a HOTS question. That is a tricky question, right? So we must not be trapped. Sebenarnya bila kita ingat nak buat high level question, is actually tricky question. It's not tricky question. It's just a matter of bringing the students daripada level yang bawah tu, bring them up to a higher cognitive level, so only then they'll be able to answer the question very well. So if let's say the students are not dia for example dia macam copy je jawapan tapi dia menjawab, katalah kita punya guide dia propose tapi dia copy je jawapan dari textbook, that is not considered high order thinking skills punya assessment. Okay, so well done. I think you have done a lot here. So yes, high level is not tricky. Bukan. Kalau if you give tricky question, it's not high level. Macam mana nak buat soalan tadi yang berkaitan dengan peribahasa tadi, a high level question? For example macam ni. Dalam bahasa Melayu kan, cikgu dah ajar dah student buat dialog. Okay, dialog tapi dalam senario lain. Tulis dialog about something. Perbincangan anda dengan kawan-kawan tu contohnya about something. And then the teachers also teach the students about peribahasa. Right? Okay, now in the final assessment, the teacher give the question to the student. Okay, create a dialogue based on this peribahasa. Sepandai-pandai tupai melompat akhirnya jatuh ke tanah juga. So that is considered a high level, high order thinking skill punya question. Okay, why is that? Because cikgu dah ajar berkenaan dengan dialog. Cikgu juga dah ajar berkenaan dengan peribahasa. Now, they are trying to combine together and the student need to answer, create a dialogue based on that peribahasa, which the teacher had never taught them before specifically in the class. So that is considered high order thinking skills. Got it tak? In terms of my example on that peribahasa punya assessment tadi. Okay? Okay, let me move back to the slide. High order tricky question. So well done on the teamwork that you have done so far. Okay, so let's move to the problem solving versus exercise solving. This is something that I think people a bit confused here. Is that because they feel that they have given problem to the student, but actually it's not a problem, it's just an exercise. Okay, so what's the difference? Let me read through first on the exercise solving. Exercise solving ni dia kata, oh by the way, towards the end of this workshop, ada quiz tau. So kalau siapa boleh jawab dapat menang, saya bagi hadiah. Okay, so stay tune sampai ujung. Exercise solving. So
Hadiah Nixia kan?
ada hadiah, Prof.
Nixia.
Ada.
Nixia punya hadiah lah. Nixia.
Bagi EO nanti. Okay, so exercise solving. What is exercise solving? Exercise solving it is actually involve a process to obtain the one and only right answer for the data given. So maksudnya kalau kita bagi soalan kat student and there is only one answer to that, that is considered exercise solving. It's not problem solving. Yang kedua, the situation is well defined, which means that there is an explicit problem statement with all the necessary information. Maksudnya kalau kita specify all the parameters, contohnya, okay, boy Kak Odi, sakan. So if let's say you want to give, contohlah kita bagi, the length of this pipe is 5 meters. The diameter of the pipe is 3 centimeters. Calculate the the volume of this particular pipe. Okay, so terus that is not considered as a problem solving. Walaupun macam mana how the window dressing look like, how actually nice you kept, and then you put all these kind of parameters, is not considered as problem solving. It's just an exercise solving. Okay, which means that you have well defined the parameters and everything. The students has encountered similar exercises in books, in class or in homework. Maksudnya dia dah buat benda tu yang sama, dia dah repeat. So that is not problem solving, is considered as exercise solving. And exercises often prescribe assumption to be made. Maksudnya kalau dia jawab soalan tu, dia dah tahu dah assumption apa dia nak pakai. That is considered exercise solving. And there is usually one approach that gives the right answer. And then there is a usual method which is to recall familiar solution from previously solved exercise. It involves only one subject and in many cases only one topic, which is very deductive. And communication skills are not essential as most of the solution involve maths and sketches. So these are all what we call as exercise solving. Exercise solving, it can only bring the students up to level C3, which is up to level of application. That's all. Okay. Tapi dia sebenarnya tak membenarkan pun student untuk ada jawapan yang lain. There must be only one answer and it's already being done, it's already being tested, this is the answer. So that is not considered as HOTS question, it's considered as LOTS question. Okay, so the question from YouTube, what do you think if we include values under HOTS, for example, ethical thinking? That would be good. I mean, that could also reach a higher level of HOTS. Question from YouTube, in reaching to C5 assessment, we acknowledge that the student has to start from the lower cognitive level. However, do we highlight these lower level activities as part of marks for C5? No, you don't need to. Because nanti kalau kita pecah-pecahkan, it will make student tu macam guided. Bila student tu guided, you bring them down to a lower order thinking skills. Okay, you dah jadi procedural. Bila dah jadi procedural, it's only leave to application. So you don't actually, if you want to test them on HOTS punya question, it does not necessarily you have to break it down to subsets further. Okay, the students need to undergo those process. You don't have to highlight the process to the students. Okay, so that is exercise solving. But what is actually problem solving? Problem solving is actually, it involves a process used to obtain a best answer to an unknown subject to some constraint. The situation is ill-defined. Maksudnya there is dia problem statement dia bukan something yang ada parameters. Maksudnya students need to make their own assumption in order for them to solve the problem. So that is considered as ill-defined. Okay. So and then whenever they make that kind of assumptions, they need to justify why they pick up this kind of assumptions. The next one is the context of the problem is brand new. It is something that the students tak pernah encounter. For example, macam I give example macam peribahasa tadi kan, students buat dialog, students pernah belajar tulis dialog, student pernah belajar peribahasa, tapi dialog berkenaan dengan peribahasa student tak pernah buat. So that is actually you're bringing them to a bit higher level. Now a problem that they ever encountered before. Okay. There is no explicit statement in the problem that tells the student what knowledge or technique skills to use in order to solve the problem, which means that the students daripada awal dia kena figure out themselves. For example, okay, in which subject that I learn this thing, in which subject that I learn this thing, in which particular topics that I learn this thing that I need to apply it. So the student need to figure out themselves. So a better problem is actually when you start to integrate with other topics or other courses. Okay. The question is, can a take-home assessment consist of a C2 open-ended question? Let me bring back to that answer later. Okay. There may be more than one valid approach, and the algorithm for solving the problem is unclear. Maksudnya dia tak ada algorithm tertentu, which means that they need to think about, okay, what are the knowledge that I have gone through, and then how do I pick this knowledge and apply in order for me to solve this particular problem. Integration of knowledge from variety of subjects, as I mentioned earlier, and it requires strong oral or written communication skills to convey the sense of the problem and present the result. So this is actually the difference between problem solving versus exercise solving. Right, so please share with me, if we go to Mentimeter, give example based on your course, what is a suitable problem to be developed instead of giving an exercise? Boleh tak share dengan saya? Can you think for a while, what would be the suitable problem to be developed in your course instead of giving them an exercise? Sebab tadi I just give an example based on bahasa Melayu kan, dah jenam kan, peribahasa HOTS level for them, for the students. Tapi how do you give suitable problem to the students? What kind of problem that you can give to the student instead of giving them an exercise? Can you answer in Mentimeter? There is a question direct to me, is that does problem solving something like ill structure solving? It could be that way, yes, because it's something like it is an ill-defined, and therefore you cannot simply solve it by just looking at the textbook. The answer is not in textbook, but the answer require you to read at the textbook and try to relate whatever the topics in that textbook, and then try to make judgment on that and make it as part of the solution. So maksudnya dia tak dapat direct daripada textbook or exercise or something like that. So the suggestion that you are coming here is, for example, mini research on the effective marketing communication program by the organization. Okay, this is something that you can ask the students to do, doing some kind of research, investigation. So this is a good open-ended punya study. Industrial-based problem, this is also good because you, especially the problem that come directly from industry. Maksudnya kita tap terus pada industri, and then we assign as a team, minta student tolong solve this particular problem. Okay. And then case scenario for clinical cases, I think this is also interesting. For example, because the students, when they start to do case study, kita ada different case, dia macam sama juga dengan industrial based problem tadi. And then the next one is case study, state the scenario element and ask what or how the solution can be approached. That's good. Software programming to solve a problem, that is also very wonderful, something new, something that could benefit people. And then you have case study, yes. How do you create an applicable solution to the inequality of access to online learning for the B40 school children? This is a good question. For example, like it's an open-ended, and then it asks the students to trigger how they could solve this, coming out with so many suggestions, and then give some parameters of learners and asking them to design appropriate teaching learning activities, right? Case-based related to my course. Define and analyze mental health based on what you have learned from the text or lectures. I think this is a little bit, maybe this can be expanded a bit, little bit more, especially to assess HOTS, because if let's say you just state define mental health, it's just level 1, okay, because they can just copy from the textbook. But if let's say you start to give them scenario based, then it will be good. Wait for a while. Okay. And then bagaimana hendak pastikan bukan kekan disebatikan dalam diri penggunaan bahasa Melayu. Ni saya tak faham apa benda, tapi as long as it is looking and open-ended, that's good. Simulation, propose 3 techniques in improving the efficiency of solar cells. Yang ni, as long as it does not in the textbook. If let's say, for example, you have teach this before, maybe that's is something that cannot be given lah. For example, like you give them a scenario of the solar cells of at different conditions, something like that, different scenario, and the techniques too is not simply just pick from the textbook ataupun just cherry picking from the textbook. So that is okay. Tapi kalau something yang jawapan dari dalam textbook just macam cherry pick the textbook, I think that's not HOTS enough. Okay. How to find an organic treatment, aka herbal extract that is effective in treating parasitic infection in human. The best thing kalau dia dapat buat eksperimen lagi bagus kan. Tapi if let's say they are doing investigative research, is also good. And then my background is built environment, so we give real site project to students, so they will do SWOT analysis and propose a design to solve the problem. As long as the design, as long as the problem yang bagi tu tak repeat dalam kelas sebelum ni, maksudnya bila ada aktiviti dalam kelas kita buat benda yang sama, so and then dia dah tahu dah ada procedural dia yang kena lalui, macam very systematic way of doing it, that's not considered as HOTS. Tapi kalau dia macam something yang different, way out different, contohnya dalam kelas is something else, and then and then as part of the assessment you give them, okay, instead of building the site project on Earth, you build on Mars, for example, planet Mars. So how do they do that, for example lah kan, contohnya. So it's something that it is out of context that you never teach before. So you can give as part of the problem. Case studies on daily or industrial problem, okay. Case study, choose genetic traits in your family and apply the Mendelian inheritance, okay. This is good as long as it doesn't give you direct only one answer. So maksudnya kalau dia ada several answers and then they were given a real case scenario, real life application, that is considered a good problem. Okay, thank you for the a real world task. An NGO requires an instructional poster on how to make a homemade sanitary pad. Students have to research and analyze the process. Synthesis is the most important part. Design the poster that communicates the method effectively. I like this. This is very good. Problem-based punya scenario. Case study on sustainable energy, product development, propose and advertising strategy, and so on. Okay, wonderful. So thank you very much for the suggestion. I think you can start to see that what's the difference between the giving them a problem as well as giving them assignment, giving them what do you call that? Giving them exercise. All right. There's another question: producing a kit to solve problem in learning, for example, is this a problem solving or exercise solving? Producing a kit to solve problem in learning, for example. It depends actually. If let's say you have not teach them, if let's say you just give them certain guidance and then you give them something new, brand new, which they never encountered before, that could be problem solving. But if let's say you have done this before and keep repeating the same question, that is not considered as problem solving. Okay. Another question from YouTube: would it be right if we give 70% of exercise solving and 30% of problem solving per topic or skill? For me, right now, because I am very, what do you call that, saya ni kedekut nak kata kedekut macam kedekut nak bagi markah. I don't like actually to chunk down too many macam nitty gritty punya exercise tau. Macam contohnya macam assignment 1, assignment 2, assignment 1 1%, assignment 2 1%. I don't like that. I always, what I give is actually when I look at the learning outcomes, okay, this is the learning outcome I want my student to attempt. All right. So what I will always do is actually towards the end of teaching that learning outcome, I give them some kind of assessment. So it may be like one assignment, and I give them, okay, you're going to have 2 weeks to solve this particular assignment. Along the way, in order for them to reach to that capability to be able to solve the assignment, is actually I do a lot of formative assessment in the class. For example, like kalau nak buat calculation pun, it's a calculation inside the class. Okay, and I facilitate them how to do the calculation. And lepas tu, I ask them, okay, this is part of the lattice 2B that you can do on your own. This is kind of the question, this is the tutorial, okay, this is the example, you can do on your own. You don't want to do, up to you. I'm not actually going to mark it. I'm not going to give marks based on this. It is your effort to make sure that you're able to understand how to do it. So exercise solving ni, I always give as part of formative assessment, not really summative assessment. Because saya kena ikut markah, saya nak bagi markah saya tu only for an impactful assignment, not really something yang macam benda-benda yang kecil-kecil. Adalah sedikit just to make sure that the students ada motivation sikit, macam contohnya nak top up on the certain coursework mark, for example, but not too much. Other than that, it's just that they have to do, most of the time is actually I empower them to do their own learning. So I give them the tutorial, I give them the solution, and do on your own. Okay, because I would say to them, if you're not doing this, then basically nanti susah you nak jawab assignment yang akan saya bagi for me. Could you please give some principles of using case studies for assessment? I think one thing for sure, saya tak ada jawapan for everything, but you can actually make sure that it is something that the student had not encountered before. If let's say the student have been using that case study and almost similar answers, similar jawapan, then it is not considered a good case study. But there are also a workshop actually on writing a case study provided by someone else. Maybe if you are interested in case study writing, then maybe you can approach and attend this particular workshops, which I don't have mine lah. Any form of assessment must be detailed in course reference book. Any form of assessment must be detailed in course reference book. Saya kurang faham sikit soalan ni. Bukan Dr. Fazila, formative assessment ialah ungraded. Formative assessment ialah something yang kita tak grade. Summative assessment ialah something yang kita bagi markah. Okay, final exam sahaja is not only summative assessment. Kalau if let's say you give test in between, you bagi quiz in between dan ada yang ada markah, those are actually summative assessment. Okay, formative assessment ni ialah assessment yang kita boleh bagi feedback without students ni tak perlu pun based on the markah. Okay. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Okay, so these are some step-by-step of preparing HOTS punya problem. Okay, so I adapted this from Prof. Khairiyah. She's actually from UTM, the former director Center for Engineering Education in UTM. So there are actually 4 steps in order for us to prepare HOTS punya problem. The first one is actually we need to decide what will be the learning outcome to be attained. So for example, what need to be assessed? Is it ability to apply, evaluate, analyze, create, justify, or anything else? So we need to decide on that. Second one is we need to activate those intended outcome, which is the verb tu dalam kelas kita. And the third one, we provide formative assessment. As I mentioned just now, formative assessment is something that you do not grade, but you provide them as part of the scaffolding activities inside the class. And finally, you administer the final exam. It is open-ended with rubric prepared. So this is actually the 4 steps to prepare HOTS problem. So first of all, we need to decide the intended learning outcome. Kita nak student kita achieve apa? What do we want our students to achieve? Those are the first thing that we need to decide. Okay. The second one is we need to decide on the taxonomy level that they will attain. Okay. So this is where actually as part of the learning outcome that we spell out. And after that, okay, the question, I am teaching first year, first sem student material balance. Any advice how to implement HOTS for them? I actually I taught material balance last year. I will share with you afterwards. Okay, I share some question with you. Design and plan instruction based on real application. Okay, yang ni kalau if you remember balik tadi how people learn the framework students will be able to learn well if let's say the knowledge to are being related to the real application. Okay, what is the application to the knowledge? What is the application to the real world application out there based on our knowledge? So those are the things that we need to relate, and we need to do some kind of activities. Okay, we need to do some kind of activities to make sure that the students be able to relate to that kind of application. I give one example. One of the things that I taught my students is subject called as reaction engineering. Reaction engineering, okay. The reaction engineering subject ni is actually designing a reactor. Dalam chemical engineering is designing a reactor. Reactor ni is a reactor lah where actually the reaction happen. Okay, for example like kita daripada petroleum punya sources, you want to create something that you put on your face, Nivea tu kan, macam Nivea cream, Nivea nak letak kat muka, and then you put in the reactor. Bila dah keluar dari reactor baru ada separator. So what I did, in order for me to make sure that my students could be able to relate whatever that they learn, that they're going to learn in the future, is actually trying to relate the concept of that reactor to with the things surrounding them. So one of the formative assessment that I give to my students is actually formative assessment. I ask them to be in a group of 3 or 4, and they need to discuss. Okay, I taught them several type of reactors. Okay, and I said pick one reactor and associate it to the real world application or the phenomenon out there. So that is a formative assessment. And then I give them about 30 minutes so that they can discuss among themselves, decide on it, and make some kind of presentation. So the thing is, those particular questions is not in the textbook. Tak ada pun dalam textbook menceritakan, oh, this type of plug flow reactor can be associated dengan apa-apa. Tapi I give them the questions. So they start to trigger out, okay, this is a knowledge that, okay, I have some knowledge about the real world application out there. And I have a new knowledge that I'm going to learn, which is the type of reactor. So how do I relate these two? Okay, so that is where actually students start to come out. Okay, for example, they come out with packed bed reactor related dengan photosynthesis. They relate plug flow reactor dengan how the digestion process work. Okay, and then they relate, for example, there are certain other process that they relate with certain type of reactors. So that is some kind of instruction that you give in the class to make sure that daripada day one, student has already been given of high order thinking skills punya activities. Sebab kalau, if let's say you are not giving them HOTS punya activities inside the class, there is no way that you could give HOTS questions towards the end of the semester and make them score that subject. Okay, so those are the things that we need to do. And cognitive outcome should be based on the thinking process involved, avoid being tied down by the verb. That I think this is very important that I want to highlight. Ada soalan-soalan yang awal-awal tadi about actually my learning outcome is only at C2 for example. Okay, can I make HOTS question out of that? Yes, you can. Okay, because you can allow the students to be able to explain things beyond the context or beyond the syllabus. Okay, it is up to you actually, because the learning outcome should be able to tell what the students can do and can achieve. It's not about the syllabus. If let's say the learning outcome is derived from the syllabus, then it is something that need to be revised. Maksudnya the learning outcome itself need to be revised. I know that many of the educators out there, what they did is actually just to make it easy, they just look at the syllabus and they create the learning outcome out of that syllabus. Sedangkan the most important part is actually we need to ask ourselves is what do we want the students to be? What do we want the students to learn? Kan? And then that's the problem. We always associate ourselves, we just take all the cognitive side learning outcomes. Sedangkan in a learning process, there is an affective domain, there is a psychomotor domain. So how do we address this in our learning outcome? Because if we don't address this in our learning outcome, if for example, let's say you want the students to have a teamwork, but you didn't decide that you want the students to have teamwork, and then you didn't spell out in your learning outcome, but you give them group project, and then you want in your rubric you are measuring the teamwork. That is not fair. Okay, because in the first place, if let's say you just want them to make sure that they be assessed easily, they work as a team, that is fine. Tapi bila you start measure the level of the teamwork among the student, but you are not actually spelling out in your outcomes, I think that is not fair for the students. Okay, so what you have to do is actually whenever that you spell out the cognitive outcome in terms of, like, for example, for example, you ask them, for example, the learning outcome is like the guide word is just discuss or be able to describe things. Okay, it doesn't mean that towards the end you ask them to describe. You can also make them participate in the group, in the activities to discuss among themselves. Okay, so that later on they can come out or describe with kind of answer, so that you are actually making them you are making HOTS activities inside the class. Okay, what the student wants must be spelled out in course content. It's not course content, it's a course outcome. What we want the students to be, I think that should be spelled in the course outcome. And step number 2 is actually students activate the intended outcome of verbs via teaching and learning activities in the class. Okay, so this is what happened is that imagine if TM Tazi is one of the MQA auditors. Hence I don't want to be. Okay, step 2, student activate the intended outcome of verbs via teaching and learning activities in the class. This means that kita kena buat, whenever that we have the learning outcome, the teaching and learning activities too must activate that particular verbs. For example, like when you say it's analysis, to analyze, to evaluate, to apply on something, those activities must happen inside the class. Okay, must happen inside the class, which means that the students are activating it. Okay, so contohnya macam mana? For example, like if let's say you want the students to analyze things inside the class, what do you give to them? You don't instruct them, okay, this is how you analyze them, for example, but you can facilitate them. So there are a lot of student-centered based activities inside the class. Only then the students be able to achieve the HOTS level intended. Okay, this is where actually kalau student tersangkut, that's why you add scaffolding where necessary. When student ask you question, it's not necessarily that you answer back by giving the answer. You can question back the students. Okay, what do you think about this? Why do you think this is the answer, for example? Those are the things that you can actually start to ask the students to start to figure out and start to think, use the cognitive punya thinking inside the class. Okay, kalau kita bagi daripada awal, okay, kalau you dapat data macam ni, this is the way how you going to analyze it. Okay, and then this is the way how you infer it. That is not HOTS. Okay, that is not HOTS. And then jangan complain towards the end that my student tak boleh jawab lah soalan I ni, because actually you are not making the students activated and HOTS enough inside the class. And make connection to real situation and other topics learned. I think this is also equivalently important. Okay, very important that the students need to be able to relate whatever that they learn to other subjects that they are learning, to the future connection as well as in the past. So if you remember the how people learn framework tadi, learner's background, you have to make sure that the students punya background knowledge is also added up to this whenever that you want to introduce something new. Okay. This is step 2. So one of the things in order for you to activate the student in the class, as I mentioned last week, is actually what we call as informal cooperative learning, or we call it active learning. So how do you make active learning? For example, like first thing first is you give a question to the students and then ask them to think first about the answer. And after that, you assign some kind of breakout session where actually they participate with each other, try to come up with one solution among all the solutions that they have thought before. And after that, they can do overall class interaction. This could be done even in online class. Okay, by doing some kind of breakout. Of course, by doing breakout just now, tadi 400 lebih, it's not as efficient. That's why, as I said last week, one of the limitation, if you want to be very empathetic in teaching and learning, the class size, even though it allows up to 500 participants, 500 students, it has to be done in a small size. So that only then you'll be able to actually monitor them effectively or facilitate them effectively well. Okay. That is one of the way, doing active learning, for example. So what I did, for example, in the past, I have Microsoft Teams. Okay, Microsoft Teams ni, I already have a small unit kat situ kan. Dia macam unit 1, unit 2, unit 3 dalam Microsoft Teams tu. And I already assigned like 3 to 4 students in this particular group. So they become a team. And then ada dalam unit 2 ada student lain pula. Ada student tak boleh tengok unit lain, tak boleh tengok group lain. Okay, they just need to have like unit 1 sampai unit 10 contohnya. So each group tu ada 3-4 orang and so on. So whenever I have questions to the students, I ask them, okay, now please think about this and then please join your breakout session, please join this group, and I give you 5 minutes to discuss the solution. So, and then I use Mentimeter so that they can report back whatever the discussion that they have. So that is the pattern that I always use just to activate their HOTS punya level inside the class. And I have different kind of question that I put up to the students. For example, like spotting the mistakes, what are your confusion, and then for example, like how to do this and how to do that. So those are the questions that I put up in the class so that the students' HOTS level are being activated. Okay. Another thing that you can do is, as I mentioned again last week, is on about cooperative learning. So what I did in the past is actually when I created these particular units, they're already as a team. They have their own names. They have actually some kind of spirit among themselves. Sometimes what you can do best is actually you gamify the experience, which means that you give some points. For example, like which group give the best answer, they get 10 points. And they collect points every week, for example. And these are the things that could actually allow them to be more unified in their team. Okay. And for example, like if let's say you are giving them quiz, okay, giving them quiz, everybody answer individually, but then you prorate the marks, and then with the highest mark you give them extra points, for example. So that is something that could allow them actually to be participative in your grouping, in your group-based activities. Okay. Step 3 here is actually to provide formative assessments, something like open book quizzes, open book tests to the students. As I mentioned earlier, there are some kind of open books that you give to the students. Okay. You didn't give mark to them, but actually this is macam bagi the taste or feeling about what it's going to be when they're going to have a final assessment later on. Okay. So, and then after that you can give feedback. Okay, and then you can give them so that you're preparing them for open book written assessments if you want to do written assessment, and then you can ask them to do reflection and you can give feedback to them. Even actually you can ask them to give feedback to you about the assessment. So if let's say you want to create the assessment, first of all, you define, ini saya dah cakap tadi, define the outcome. First of all, when you want to do the assessment, what is the outcome that you want to achieve? And then before you assess that particular students, you need to create the activities that will bring active verb in the outcome. And then along the way, you need to decide what are the scaffolding required in order for the students to be able to answer it. And whenever that you complete the assessment, you have to try it first. And then you make revisions. So for example, like if you're using open-ended assessment, if let's say you be able to answer in 1 hour, this is what Prof. Richard Felder give a tips. Dia kata if let's say you as an educator, if let's say you prepare some kind of assessment, if let's say you're doing it for 1 hour, you'll be able to finish it in 1 hour, multiply with 3 for the student. Okay, which means that the right time for the student to assess that is about 3 hours. If let's say you can complete only within 2 hours, then you have to multiply by 3, which is 6 hours. So that is how somehow the guideline for you to decide how long that you should give to the student in order for them to attempt the question. Okay. So this is a little bit on alternative assessment, which is also a recap. Okay, I think I don't have to repeat this. This is I already stated last week about what is authentic assessment and so on. I'll be sharing the slides with you later. Okay, I think just now there is a question from Dr. Khozema bin Ahmed Ali. You are teaching material balance, right? And even actually this work for everyone, I think. So for example, I use Mentimeter. Like this, I will need to revise more on these sections or topics. So they need to discuss as a team, and then they need to reflect on their own. I need to revise more on this. And then, for example, like I also give them a problem. It's not a problem. It's an exercise, right? It's a scenario like macam apa? There is a flow, there is a diagram, block diagram, and so on. There is a calculation, and then after that, I put up that. And I'll just ask them, okay, I want you to think individually about this problem and then think about what you do not understand, for example. And then after that, they just jot down what they think they do not understand. And after that, okay, the next 3 minutes, please join your breakout team. Discuss with your team what they do not understand. And then summarize the problem given. So what is the problem is all about, for example. So I ask them, okay, put in Mentimeter, your discussion. So here, you can start to feel that the students are forced, being forced actually to think about it and to participate in their group. Okay, and then they are actually forced to think. Okay, because and then they need to share the solution. Another question is, for example, like what are your confusions about the problem just now I shared to you? So they need to think and they need to share the solution as well. So these are some questions that you can ask continuously inside the class and ask the student to participate. Okay, so it's not you can see that this question is not simply a direct question. You know, it's something that they have to look into it and to think about it, and then they think, what are my confusion? And most importantly, when you create this breakout session, some majority of their understanding will be resolved in this breakout session. Only one or two major things that they cannot understand, those are the things that I put up in Mentimeter that you can address and answer to it. But other than that, they can discuss in their own team and they got the understanding better by the discussion. Another thing that I do is actually, for example, like I give them slides and I give them the videos, okay, for online classes. So my videos is in my YouTube. I ask them to watch the YouTube and I give them slides. And then during the live session I have with them, okay, so what I ask them to do is actually, I say, okay, read slide 12 to 15, okay, from the slides, jot down things that make you confused. So what I ask them, okay, now let's go back to slide 12 to 15, and then write down from the slide what they confused. And then after that, discuss with your team members in the breakout session and choose one that most of you feel confused about it. And then share in Mentimeter. So this is kind of activity that you are actually activating the verbs. Because, for example, in my learning outcome is the students be able to perform material balance, okay, on some kind of solution, perform material balance. So in order for me to make them be able to perform, I must go through the process of first they need to remember, after that they need to apply, and after that they need to some kind of analyze. So this is where actually I start to make them doing some kind of analysis, okay, because they have slides, and then I ask them to analyze what makes you confused. So that is the verb that I try to activate them. And only then, when they start to analyze that, only then they'll be able to perform well. So that's how you bring up the HOTS punya level, starting from the LOTS, low order thinking skills. Here, this is in slide 27, read the entire question, okay? And then I say replicate another question similar to this. And I say write it down and share in ULearn, and I ask other team to solve for it. Okay, so it's allowed the students to start to see the pattern, for example. Okay, but of course the final exam is not going to be like that. It's just a matter of making them reinforce in they know what would be the procedure in order for them to solve the problem. But of course the final assessment will not be looking like that. At least dia dah mahir sampai level application. Okay, so that is some kind of activating the verbs, activities that you could do inside your class. Alright. So this is I bagi open-ended. I call it quiz, team quiz actually here. Okay, example of team quiz. This is about material balance, but it got to do something with dia macam I give them about the problem berkaitan dengan werewolf. But what I'm looking here is actually something got to do with distillation problem. So what I wanted the students to think is actually about, okay, how do I apply this knowledge in solving this particular problem? These students, they took about 3 hours in solving this quiz team. I give them about 3% lah. Okay, adalah markah sikit kat sini. Because I don't want them to be very bogged down by actually the marks. Kalau I put lagi tinggi, I say dia lagi frust kot, tak boleh jawab. Tapi there are some kind of parameters I give, but a lot of the time that they need to do some kind of assumption, lots of assumptions, and then different teams have a different scenario in order for them to solve. So here, what I expected them to do is to do some kind of analysis, some kind of application, and then derive new equation, which is the creation part. Okay. So when I give them this kind of question, okay, we can skip this. This is how I analyze and create the rubric for them. So the rubric could be, first is actually ability to analyze information. So how much weightage I provide for them. Applying knowledge, known information to the new information, and create new equation, for example. So, and this is where actually I start to give rating. Okay, students are able to analyze the information thoroughly and deeply with clear and justified assumption. So if let's say the students are able to do that, straight away they got rating 5. And then if let's say student applying known information to the new information, and if let's say they be able to contextualize the old information and relate it with the information in a justified way, they got another 5 marks. Okay, and if let's say the students are able to create new equations, then I can give students derive all the equation needed sensibly. This is for undergrad, Dr. Adam. If lecturer can complete a task in 1 hour, students must be given 3 hours. This is usually for undergraduate students. Question from YouTube: what do you think asking students to create assessment question themselves? I appreciate your sharing. I'll be doing the sharing afterwards. Okay. There is a part where I'll be sharing that. Okay, we're gonna skip this one. I don't have much time. But you can create the rubric. There is another question that I give to the student. It's very open-ended here. For example, I say a volcano of the diameter of a football field was observed to become active and estimated to erupt for at least in a month and will be affecting the nearby village. As the engineers and chemists who are expert in material balance, you and your team members are planning to solve this issue without having to move the villagers. I give them some kind of condition. Share your thoughts in solving this. Please share some calculation made, if any. So what happened is that this is what I want the students to do is actually ability to relate the situation with material problems. So they can pick either one. For example, they're doing bypass, they're doing recycle, mass balance, for example. This is the team quiz, Prof. So they need to answer in the team. So ability to give sound assumption and justify them. and show example with suitable aid or flow diagram, how the problem can be mitigated, and perform some example of calculation using some assumed basis. Okay, so what they did is actually, I want them to just relate some kind of information that they have in the past, and then lepas tu try to consolidate within the team, what do they think, which particular material balance that you could do. Is it bypass ke, dia nak buat recycle ke, something like that. So that is actually that is something that they could know. Of course, I didn't give mark. Kalau kat sini 15 mark pun, I just state to them, okay, it's gonna be 15 marks, but in actual, your coursework mark tu, I ask them, I ask them, minta consent pada diorang. What do you think the percentage that I should give to do? Sometimes after the test tu, dia kata, so tak payah kira lah yang ni susah sangat, we will not be able to answer. Tapi, I give them the taste of what would be in a open book later on, open book ended. Okay, is the activity for them, right? Okay, so I'm gonna skip this question as well. What makes a good rubric? Okay, tak apa. I think I'll bring this question to you. Let's participate and answer me. Okay, what makes a good rubric? Can you share with me? What is actually a good rubric? Can you go to menti.com and use the code 7939545? Okay, from your response is that it is measurable and clear requirements are stated. Okay, it must assess the outcome. It is objective. You tell me. I'm gonna tell you, but you tell me first. Okay, straightforward and clear, not too complicated. What else? Something that clearly measurable, smart, which is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Really assess the student according to the outcome. The one that includes all the aspect of learning outcomes, student able to understand the element of assessment that they need to deliver, must have objective, able to differentiate between excellent, good, average, and weak students, expectation are measurable, clear definition. The most important part is also clear descriptors. Okay, clear descriptors is highlighted. Can easily differentiate between one ranking to another, clearly define achievable and measurable components. I don't think that it's easy for student to achieve. It's something that realistic for student to achieve. It's not easy lah. It must be realistic. Okay. Specific criteria meet the expectation for students and teacher. I just copy from Google. Okay. All right. So this is some of your thoughts about what makes a good rubric. Okay. Let us see some what the experts say. I'm not the experts. Okay, but there are some here. A good rubric, first of all, must have criteria. Okay. First of all, kita kena spell out what is the criteria that we are assessing. Macam tadi saya letak dalam my rubric, what are the learning objective and what are the description for each rating. Okay. And then lepas tu, it must have a clear gradation. Maksudnya dia kena ada distinguish between qualitative differences in performance that are observable and measurable. Okay. Usually, when we do the rubric, it's not testing the academic ability. We are not testing the academic ability, but we are testing the performance of the students. Okay? So maksudnya contohnya macam kalau macam tu sampai bila-bila pun student yang pandai dapat markah tinggi, student yang tak berapa pandai dapat markah rendah. Okay? And we usually share this kind of rubric with the students so that the students be able to actually look at this particular rubric and see how they can get a good mark, so they try to improve themselves to become better. Okay, and then a good rubric should be reliable. Maksudnya kalau kita buat rubrik tu, first of all, it is good to be validated first. Maksudnya kita buat bukan seorang-seorang. If let's say you have a team of, contohnya kalau kita sekarang ni kita buat test whatsoever kan, and open-ended, it need to be vetted. When it is vetted, the rubric need to be vetted as well. Okay? And then everybody need to agree, validation, bagi validation, okay, this is a rubric. And one of the things to make sure that it is a good rubric, which means that if let's say we are assessing the similar students, few teachers, few lecturers, they come across almost similar to the same marks. So that is a good rubric. Tapi when they started to have like this student, this lecturer bagi ni A, student ni, lecturer ni bagi C+, so there is something wrong with that rubric. Maksudnya it's not clear enough. There is maybe in terms of the description, maybe in terms of the rating, the differentiation between the rating. So that is something that you have to check. I think this is a good gauge lah, actually, just to see that how does a good rubric, especially on the reliability. And a rubric possessing validity, which is simple for the teacher to grade, and it needs to score what is central to the performance and assignment. Okay, again, what you can see like here throughout this, it mentioned a lot of performance. Okay, performance, so that you can actually measure the students based on the performance, observed performance. Okay, so these are the things that we put in our rubric. The question is, what is your view when people say that OBE is sometimes focusing too much time on finding the correct verb? I think people has been misled with this. That is also one thing that saya cerita pengalaman saya. Sorry lah, kadang-kadang saya campur-campur pengalaman, experience. Pengalamanmu tak banyak sangat. I think Prof Karim lagi banyak pengalaman. Sifu. Tapi saya cerita pengalaman saya sendiri lah. My own mistake in actually when the first time OBE is being introduced. Masa tu, when the OBE being introduced, what I only know is that whenever that I want to conduct my lecture, sebelum start lecture tu, I need to spell out, okay, by the end of this lecture, you should be able to do this. Pakailah verb macam-macam. Gunalah verb tu, verb ni macam-macam kan. Lepas tu bagi lecture. Bagi lecture for the next 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Cakap. Kan? Lepas tu, adalah tanya soalan sikit kat student. Tanya soalan kat student pun macam ni. Do you understand? Student, apa jawapan student? Yes. No, that will be only the answer, right? Cara kita tanya soalan kat student pun tak betul. Okay? Do you understand this? Yes. Right. Lepas tu, and then kita pun, bila kita tanya, student jawab, no. The student answer, no. Okay, which part you don't understand? Everything. Lepas tu ulanglah balik. Jadi marah, kita mengamuk dalam kelas pula kan, sebab student tak faham. So and then after that, by the end of the lecture, I just spell out, you have learned about this. 1, 2, 3, and gunalah guide pelbagai. In actual, what we forgot is that when we promise to the student, when we want going to start the learning outcome that we're going to do this particular guide word, we have to make sure that it is being activated in that class, that particular verb. For example, if I say, in today's lecture, you should be able to analyze the data, blah, 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 blah. Which means that dalam kelas tu, you promise the student you need to do some kind of data analysis. So they have to do that. They have to be activated on that. So kalau kita bagi lecture je, tak gunalah. You are not fulfilling your promise. Okay? So that is actually somehow the OBE is all about. Bukan, tapi sekarang ni people are thinking too much OBE about documentation. You know, like everything must be put clearly, nice verb, and lepas tu align this COPO. I think people are being misled by the OBE documentation. When actual is in spiritually, what OBE should be done is actually you fulfill what you promise, right? You fulfill what you promise. You actually wanting them to be able to create something in the class. You do that in the class. You promise them that they must be able to analyze on something. They must be in that semester, they have to do that. And you show the evidence they're doing that. That's all. That's all. Okay? Tapi the problem is, the problem is the people who are doing this particular OBE pun, they do not understand the activity of teaching and learning. And that's why they tak align. Okay? They are not aligned to each other. That make us lost the spirit of what actually good teaching is all about. Okay? So I hope that by listening to my ranting today that you know already that OBE ni bukan menyusahkan sepatutnya. So supposedly OBE ni is about we fulfill the promise to what we wanted to do in the first place. What is our intended outcomes? Okay. Right. The next thing is I would like to share is the step 4, which is administer final assessment. Okay, open-ended with rubric prepared. So this is where actually we design the questions based on the intended teaching learning outcome as well as teaching and learning activities. And then we make rubric based on the standard determined. And this is where actually we briefing the students. So this is step 4 final untuk kita buat the final assessment to the students. So for example, these are some of the questions that I give to my students in the past when I was in UTP. This particular 2 questions, I give them for 24 hours. Okay, dekat UTP, what I think I praise them is actually they come out all out memang dengan extended assignment ni. Dia bagi masa 24 jam kepada students so that they be able to answer this question. And the question, for example, like here, they need to do a lot of research. And then they need to study, they need to put some kind of investigation. And here I ask them to prepare a maximum 3-minute video explaining it and upload in YouTube and share the link in answer script just to make sure that they are the one who do this kind of assessment. This could be done if let's say your class size is small. Kalau class size besar janganlah nak buat sampai nak suruh buat YouTube video dan sebagainya kan. You can ask them to do as a team, that's good, but then jangan buat sampai you also burden with it. In my class, fortunately, I just teach about I think 30 plus students, so I can watch them and I can give them this kind of assessment. And then the second one is actually I give them some kind of process and then different student with different ID. Lepas tu, if let's say this question, kalau dia orang cari dekat journal paper mana-mana, they will not be able to answer. They will not be able to find it. Memang tak jumpa. So this is one practice that we did, is actually we check back, tengok balik journal paper, textbook, ada tak this kind of question. Kalau tak ada, then we can proceed with this. So the students generally, surprisingly, I think I thought you know who scored this subject? I thought last year ada applied chemistry student as well as chemical engineering students together, and therefore I think many of those who got A is actually from applied chemistry, not chemical engineering. But chemical engineering masa during that time is what do you call that? Other qualification masuk kan. Tapi again, it's actually the student bila sampai kat hujung tu, they have this tested all out, but they'll be able to answer this very well because all this while kita dah prep dah the student daripada awal. We have prepped them with HOTS punya element. Dalam kelas dah HOTS, ada team quiz HOTS and so on. Okay, so this is somehow of example. And then I also prepared how do I give them marks and rubric. Later you can have a look at this slides. So this is some kind of example. Okay, a little bit things that I think the question just now tadi, ada soalan dekat sini is actually there is a question here before OBE things ni. Alright. Ada soalannya kat sini. What do you think asking students to create assessment question themselves? Appreciate your sharing. These are the things that I would like to share with you about making your students a teacher via flip assessment. Okay, so what I did from this. So what do you think it means by flip assessment is actually students think like us. Okay, this is where actually the students, I taught my students to think like me, and student develop exam question with complete solution. This is also one of the things that I taught my students. So what I did is, I think you can try to alter lah based on what you think is possible. But this is what I did from the past 5 years. So what I asked the students to do is actually, instead of giving them macam test, but sometimes test tu is a bit, you know, especially test ni sometimes not all the students tu sebenarnya bukan tak boleh buat. Students can do, tapi because of the panic or because of the anxiety, because of things doesn't happen well to them during that particular time, I don't usually give tests as much as possible. Sometimes I give them what we call a take-home test. Even I give them this kind of assignment. I give them this kind of assignment, even I give about like 1 week to 2 weeks for them to complete it. So what actually they did? I asked them, I give them as a role as a faculty members to set up final exam question for a specific learning outcome. Okay, so what kind of exam question? It has to be a close-ended. This is my my requirement for the students. Okay, this is, if you really look at this, this is what we call as level 6 punya this is a level 6 punya Bloom taxonomy, right? So what I did to my students is actually I taught them about Bloom taxonomy. Okay, 70 to 80% of the question must be on higher taxonomy. You have to choose the right guide word based on the attachment given. And then I said to them, you may include analogy, and then you have to prepare a complete solution. And it must be tailored to closed book format, and then formatted, for example. And then I ask them not to prepare not too many sub-guide questions, as it will make the taxonomy of lower order. And then what I assess them, I prepare a rubric. So I assess in terms of the HOTS, in terms of originality, solution, format, and language, and so on. So this is one kind of assessment that I give to them. Because you know that, why is that idea? If let's say we as a lecturer, masa kita mengajar face-to-face dulu kan, when we want to come up with a question, right? How long do we spend actually to really come up with the question? Do you have any idea? How many of you can you answer in the chat box? For example, like how long that we actually usually, in order for us to complete the question kan, kita nak buat soalan ni kan, berapa lama kita ambil masa? Panjang kau dia kan? What else? Memang it's gonna be it's long actually. Okay? Usually I would say that, okay, seminggu, sometimes it's about a week, right? So looking at that consideration, so I allow the students to be in our shoes. Let the students to be in our shoes, and then lepas tu, let them do this. Let them develop this kind of question. Okay? So when they develop this kind of question, it allow them, first is actually satu, what are the, okay, kita fikir balik, what are the thinking process behind this? First of all, they need to know, okay, what are the topics is all about, right? So dia kena buka buku, and they need to baca. They need to really understand what they are going to create, what kind of question they are going to create. That is the first thing. Second one, bila dia dah baca, dia kena try dulu soalan-soalan yang sewaktu dengannya. They need to try first the questions, similar question that they have. So they test, they try, and then they do the tutorial, and then make some kind of calculation. That is actually level of apply. And then after that, number 4, they need to analyze. Okay, what kind of question that I need to put in? How's about this? And then after that, they need to make some kind of evaluation. Okay, this particular question I'm going to bring this. But so in their decision making, there are some kind of evaluation kat situ. Finally, barulah they be able to propose and come out with create question that they need to submit. So you're bringing them throughout this whole process. I give them usually about 2 weeks, and most of the time when I ask them how actually berapa masa dia orang simpan, masa banyak dia guna untuk apa? So they always say that it's a lot about thinking. Nak fikir about what kind of question that should I ask, what kind of thinking that should I in the thinking process tu ialah what kind of question that should I put in. Itu soalan yang ni. Yang ni memang saya bagi markah because this is a very high, I would say impactful punya assignment, because what I monitor from this, masa I buat dulu close-ended question dulu, close-ended exam dulu, most of the time the topic, even weak student pun, whenever they were given this kind of assignment, bila bagi soalan exam on that particular topic, they be able to answer it very well. Maksudnya tak tinggal kosong kat situ. There is no, I think since for the past 5 years, I never encountered a blank paper anymore, which means that the students already know about something, at least attempt on something. Okay, so I usually give a big chunk of marks kat sini lah, about 10% selalunya. 10%. It is considered as individual assignment. I've also tested on the team assignment. But then it doesn't work very well because they are the free rider juga. So the best that you can do is either individual or you can give as part of pair punya assessment. Okay, in duo. Okay, so this is some kind of instruction, example of instruction that I give to them. For example, yeah, you are the newly appointed chemical engineering lecturer in one of the private college and being tasked to teach reaction engineering course for the second year degree students. Towards the end of the semester, you have been tasked by the dean of your faculty to prepare an exam question that is related to the non-acetylene steady state reactor design for your student. Lepas tu dia kata, the dean would like to see an improvement from the past exam question. So he feel that it would be very easy if the student only address first order. So they want it to be second order reversible reaction. And then he wanted you to avoid isomerization reaction at all costs. The question must be able to address reactor sizing and then should include some parameters. So these are all the parameters for the requirements, and I asked them to submit through Turnitin. So that is actually how the assignment give, and then usually about 2 weeks in a period. So whenever that I develop the rubric, this is actually rubric that puts as part of the Turnitins. And then the students, surprisingly, they come up with a very good question. Even some of the question too are used for the next exam. So it become my bank of question. Okay, because they are also very good questions. So the student, for example, like this student, he actually relate it back to his interest in rock and heavy metal, something like that. Good. So you buat something from guitar heads and something like that. But it's actually he just gave an analogy here, but he be able to relate that to what they call that, to whatever that he learned in the past. Okay. So when I tasked the students, so the student agree that they actually have flexible time in attempting the question. It allowed them to revise the whole chapter tested, and then diorang tak berapa suka sangat, but they feel that it's better than actually the test, the 3 hours test too. This is when I did first in January semester last year, when we just started with MCO. And then, and this is where actually the student feel that they have mastered the topic and it allowed them to reach higher order thinking skills. Some of them, they say, is this just right? Majority say it's just right. And some of them say it is difficult. I think also many of them say difficult. And I think the constraint that they have is they say they have limited creativity. Number one, and the question that they prepare is not of higher order thinking skills element. So that this is what they feel. Okay. So from their reflections, these are some of the reflections that I collect from them. It said it can be considered as a good idea for student. Student will not be limited to one answer, but they can also widen their knowledge. And then he said that I love the idea of allowing the students to be creative in designing the question as long as they show good understanding of the topic and provide logical question and answer. And then this is what the students said, it is they prefer to do home test instead of the take home test, instead of the test itself. So they like this one better. They said that I hope that UTP really do this home test for other subjects also, they kata. Other students said this is an interested method of learning. So this is where actually some kind of synchronous learning can happen to them. You give them some kind of assignment. Of course, monitoring is important lah. And then take home test is not bad at all as it teaches to think creatively and understand how a lecturer struggle much. This is where actually their empathy comes in. So they start to know that, oh, nak buat soalan bukanlah satu benda yang senang kan. And then it is the best way to test your student. Dia kata one have to really understand the topic before one question others. So they need to really understand this. Okay. And then one of the students, he kata last semester my result is improving than the other semester. So I feel I will try my heart and my best for the other semester. These particular students, I think I asked them after the of the semester. So that's what she responded. Okay, so we have quiz right now. Boleh Dah 12:30. Okay, get ready with the quiz. So everybody kena masuk. So before that, I try to look at the question dulu. Question bank, need to revisit and calibrate OBE. The alignment has to be done regularly as there will be some academic yang masih blur. Okay, tak apa. There is no question here, so we can start with the quiz. So we have 339 here, and we have in YouTube roughly about 101 is watching right now. So you have quiz right now. Okay, let's go to the quiz time. Ready
Hadiah sebotol Ningxia.
Wih, mahal sangat bro. Okay, let's have a look. What makes saya bawa ke depan. Okay, please join. Saya tak tahu berapa ramai boleh join. Ramai kot. Soalan ni tak susah pun. Soalan dia tak susah, tapi siapa cepat dia dapat, dia menang. Nanti pemenang minta tolong PM tepi. Okay, we have more space. Come on. Let's join.
Come on.
This is a paid one. Saya bayar for education punya license. I think 250 kot. Not second. Prof, you have any idea, Prof? Saya pun lupa dah berapa limit dia.
Tak ingat lah.
Ingat
Ya. Kami ada juga some license actually. But it's worth lah kalau nak subscribe. To me it's worth it.
Betul. I like this. Memang saya dah tak guna. Yang lain dah I'm not using that much lah. I use a lot of it is Mentimeter sebab dia macam banyak soalan boleh tanya kan. Type.
WooClap pun okey juga. WooClap.
How do you spell, Prof?
WOO clap. Clap CLAP. Satu word.
WooClap.
WOO
CLAP. Oh, okay. WooClap.
Kadang-kadang I guna juga WooClap. Dia ada additional features lah.
Oh, okay. Alright. We'll have a look at that.
Yeah.
Okay, saya beri masa lagi seminit untuk join. Hadiah saya nak bagi essential oil sebotol. Siapa nak?
Siapa tu?
Okay, 155 Tak, yang lain tak boleh join dah That's it. Tak ada nak join dah Okay. Okay. So ada 166 orang. We going to 166, 167, 69, 17. Saya start 175 je saya start. Ataupun 170 lah, 170.
What happened to others?
Ramai lah.
Tak masuk.
Tak payah ramai-ramai, nanti susah nak dapat.
May the best man wins.
Usually you get only what 50-60% lah. Yeah? Respond. Yeah. That's quite typical.
Okay, we're gonna start now. Dah masuk 170. Okay, question 1 out of 5. The first question is, In solo taxonomy, if I can obviously relate this topic with what I learned last week, then I am at okay, time's up. The answer is at relational level. Okay, so maksudnya you'll be able to relate with something that they have learned in the past, so it's a relational level. Okay, kalau dia boleh relate something which is out of the topics, out of the subjects, out of the content, then they are at the extended abstract level. Okay, let's see. Siapakah yang leading? Rapat-rapat semua ni. So EMK is the fastest so far. Okay. The next question. Enter to start countdown. In HPL, students and instructor as part of learning community that support each other to learn and attain high standard is considered as what? Which particular lens is that? Okay, so the answer is community center. Bagus ni, Alhamdulillah ramai yang dengar saya. Okay, so it's supposed when the students and instructor as part together, then you are actually what do you call that, in a community center. Okay, let's see who is actually leading. Shima number 1, number 2 Amirah. Amirah ni macam saya kenal ke? Betul ke Amirah yang saya kenal? Okay.
Amirah mana ni? Amirah matematik ke Amirah farmasi ni?
Itulah.
Farmasi.
Oh, Amirah
farmasi. Okay.
Okay. Next one. Another question. The following may be needed for developing problem solving tasks, except bila kita nak develop problem solving, which one that these are criteria except apa benda yang kita tak perlu kan? Okay, yang ni if you remember the slide antara difference between exercise solving and problem solving, okay? Kalau problem solving, problem has to be ill-defined. Okay, so it has to be ill-defined. It can be more than one answer. It can be combination. And then at the same time, we do not spell out the assumption. Let the students spell out their own assumptions. Okay, so this is assumption need to be specified. 42 answer correctly. So let's see who is getting it right.
Mana ni Dr. Amirah dah hilang dah.
Shima leading. Shima, bagus ni.
Dia ada EO Prof bagi Chan.
Siapa Shima ni?
Shima. Siapa Shima ni? Kita ada lagi berapa soalan ni?
Okay, ada Chan lagi, ada Chan.
Ada 2 soalan lagi The question right now is, why do we need to give open-ended formative assessment for our student prior to the final open-ended assessment? So we can give feedback. Jawapan dia betul, tapi yang rasa lebih tepat lah. As a scaffold system, to fill up our empty slot, so the student do not fall asleep during online class. Okay, that's very good. Many of you answer as part of the scaffolding. Mentimeter quiz, Dr. Aisyah ada music tapi semua saya tak nak pasang.
Ya, ada.
Saya rasa distracted dengan music. So the answer is scaffolding. We can give feedback is also true, but the most important part is actually we want, because my question is prior to the final open-ended, so that we can bring them as part of the scaffold.
Kalau letak muzik lagi challenging tau. Oi, hebat Shima ni.
Itulah kita nampak macam Shima ni masih leading ni. Okay, the next question. Kak Odi, beli je lah Kak Odi pada saya.
Sedihnya.
Question 5 or 5. Okay.
Last chance.
Why do we flip our assessment? Why do we flip our assessment? So our job will be easier to get bank question. So our students are able to achieve the HOTS needed. So students can have integrity in attempting the assessment. Help us to classify weak and good student. Tapi jawapan dari sudut hati sebenarnya betul lah. Our job will be easier to get bank question kan. But the most important part is actually we want to make sure that our student achieve the HOTS needed. Okay, so let me see the winner.
Jeng. Oh.
Kita ada pemenang dia ialah Shima. Shima siapa?
Kita tepuk sikit.
Shima, siapa dia Shima
Ya.
Boleh tak
Please come
respon
forward.
dekat chat, message kat saya, PM tepi pun tak apa. Tak apa mengaku dia
Ramai lah PM.
Kita dapat satu je, saya bagi hadiah satu je.
Ingat top 3 tadi.
Top.
Adalah top 3 Tazli. Kesian dia orang. Top 3 lah. Yang 2 dengan 3 tu sebotol seorang.
Tak tengok honorar dia banyak mana dapat.
Sedekah. Sesungguhnya memberi itu lebih baik daripada itu.
InsyaAllah.
Bertambah.
Saya bagi top 3. Saya bagi top 3 kepada ET dengan Zam, tolong mesej saya juga. Boleh kan? Alright.
Yeay. Bagilah pada kau ni sebab memujuk.
Adila tak payahlah, boleh beli sendiri. Okay. Alright. Okay, so yang lain tu tolong message saya, tolong PM saya, then we'll see how. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so let me see some other things that I think just a little bit of sharing here. Okay, so I think this is what I have recapped last week. First of all, is actually when we want to do outline, okay, things to think about is actually the purpose of the assessment, why we're doing this, and what to assess. We need to decide what to assess, how do we assess it, who will do the assessment, as well as suitability of the assessment for the students. Okay, so kita kena actually decide on this. We need to decide, for example, like in the first place, kenapa kita buat assessment kita berikan? All of these things we need to answer. Only then we manage to come out with a good assessment. Another things, as I mentioned last week, I think I keep going to tell you again. For example, first of all, don't give too much of assignments. Give assignment which is basically to about attain the learning outcome. Jangan bagi assignment, nak bagilah takut nanti student tak jawab, takut student jawab. Let's empower the students to become adults. I think this is something that you need to allow the students to be adults and then decide on their own learning. Okay, so you give them the really needed assignments. Jangan bagi assignment assessment. Tiap-tiap minggu ada assessment. You have to think that the student also have other subjects to do, right? The assignment duration is very important. You need to avoid unplanned assessment, and then you need to talk to your colleague who teach the same student so that assessment given do not overlap, or you can just basically integrate to each other. Okay, you can integrate to each other and you can give much more impactful assignment for the students, like an integrated project, for example. And then if let's say you're giving them project, try to monitor them regularly and give more scaffolding lah, especially during this emergency remote teaching. Okay, personalized scaffolding is also good if let's say you can give them. I would like you to have reflection, actually not in Padlet lah, sebab Padlet tadi nampak dah semak sikit. So let me ask you to write some kind of reflection dekat sini, dekat let me add a slide kat sini. My reflection. So, and then I activate it. So can you please write down your own reflection looking at these topics? Thank you, Dr. Chua Hang Quinn. I just do what I do best. That's all. So can you please share your reflection at menti.com and use code 7939545. So what have you learned from the 4-hour session today? It's about 4 hours, nearly 4 hours. Please write down your reflection. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So it can become something that could be, what do you call that? My guidance lah, my benchmark. So what I can improve in the future. So I really appreciate if you can share your reflection with me. Okay. Prof Karim, ni ada soalan. Dia kata bagaimana HOTS reflect face-to-face teaching nanti? Ni saya kena buat face-to-face lah bagi jadi HOTS.
Itu nanti kita kena buat lain. Kalau buat face-to-face lagi hotnya.
Tapi tak boleh buat 500 orang penat.
So ini kita kena buat micro learning series pula, Dato' Tazli.
InsyaAllah.
So while doing the reflection, for USM staff, please fill up the form for the CPD point, yeah, in order to get a CPD point. And please also, yeah, the same reflection that you're sharing through Mentimeter, yeah, can be shared also in the form. We read all the feedback and we use the feedback to improve our program.
Pada yang tulis dekat YouTube pun, you can write down please write down the reflection.
Yeah, those on YouTube, yeah. You can write your reflection on Mentimeter as well.
Okay, Prof. So I think that's all for my session. I pass to you, Prof. Pass back to you. Thank you very much for your time. Nearly 4 hours. Saya pun rasa macam sekejap je.
Yeah, it's so thank you so much, Dr. Tazli, for wonderful session this morning. I think it's really very loaded with a lot of things on. So it's really hot. In other words, the session is very hot, and I believe there's much more. Yeah, there's much more to learn the ideas from what we have learned from this, it can be pursued further. Of course, in order to, you have to practice, you have to apply all the knowledge that we have learned in your own practice, in your own classroom. And I have shared also some resources and the book as well. There are 2 or 3 books on rubrics, for example, which are very good. I know because I have bought the book. So I would highly recommend all of you to get this book to read more about rubric and to learn more about how to do assessment, higher order thinking assessment. Yeah. So thanks very much. Let us show our appreciation for Dr. Tazli. You can unmute your microphone and give a big round of applause, or you can use the icon also. Yeah, use the icon also to give a big round of applause. So
Tadi yang tempat
Yeah.
tu tolong email atau email saya dekat tazli@unimat.edu.my. So I write down my email there. Tolong email kat saya untuk claim hadiah.
once again, your email, Dr. Tazli.
tazli@unimat.edu.my.
Only the winner ya.
The winner yang lain jangan claim.
Lain yang kalah teruk tadi tu tak payah nak email ya.
Macam rasa menang pula tiba Prof.
Saya bagi 2 jam je daripada sekarang untuk hantar email. Kalau tak
Alright. So everyone, thank you so much, and we'll see you again. We have more coming soon. Very good, high quality speakers that we invite from outside as well as from USM. So please join our program, CDE program, in the future. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and thank you banyak-banyak, Dr. Tazli. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy. Okay, and stay productive. All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih Tazli, terima kasih Prof, terima kasih tim CDAE walaupun kalah.
Terima kasih Kak Udi. Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Macam tak puas hati dia kalah.
So lain kali fokus ya Dok.
Fokus.